Just give me a second, I'll set up the document and we'll start. But in the meanwhile, if you have any questions, इसमें HDMI नहीं है ना? अगर इसमें है तो इससे कनेक्ट कर दो, वो बेटर है. Okay, so now the document is there with you. In the last class, we had looked at various maps, various regions. We had covered Southeast Asia. And we had also looked at the map of West Asia, Mediterranean region, what is Levant, what is the Gulf region. And I had said that a lot of location-based questions in the preliminary examination are from these areas. So you should pay some attention to it. And I also said that if you read and come to the class, we can make faster progress because most of the things are self-explanatory. It only requires a reading. Second, thereby, wherever required, I can in-depth add value, right? So that is how we utilize our times. So as I said, if you have read, if there are any questions, let's start with those. All right, if there are any questions, yes, please. Yeah, अभी हम आए नहीं है ना वहाँ पे. पढ़ लेना पे ही आप ध्यान दे रहे हैं या ये भी दे रहे हैं कि एनपीटी जो बाद में आ रहा है वो मैं पहले ही कर चुका हूं. ठीक है, सीपीए हमने बांग्लादेश में मेंशन किया. हाँ, आ रहा हूं उस पर आ रहा हूं. वो आपके अगर आप पढ़ेंगे भी ना तो आपके कंटेंट में इन्फोग्राफिक बना के दिया हुआ है. ठीक है, पहला तो अभी हम उस तरह के टॉपिक्स पे पहुंचे नहीं थे, इसलिए हमने उस चीज़ को शुरू नहीं किया. तो आज उसको हम कवर करेंगे, है ना. इसलिए मैं अलग से आपके सवाल का जवाब नहीं दूंगा, बट कवरिंग द कंटेंट वो जवाब आ जाएगा. और कुछ जेनेवा कन्वेंशन भी हम अभी नहीं पहुंचे हैं. मैंने कहा था रशिया से शुरू करेंगे, उसके बाद वो आता है. क्या डाउट है वैसे? हाँ, देयर इज ऑलवेज अ पर्टिकुलर रीजन फॉर दैट. पहला तो 1 और 2 किस बारे में है? International and non-international conflicts. So that starts going into domestic jurisdiction. So जो basic minimum है, Geneva Basic Conventions, every country has adopted it. Protocols are additional. They are bringing in the coverage of humanitarian law, and sometimes in these kinds of situations it would impinge upon domestic sovereign functions at times. All right, for example, who defines what is a non-international conflict? Every country has insurgencies, for example. तो इसलिए हमेशा जब हम कोई चीज़ साइन नहीं करते उसका एक ही कारण होता है कि it would constrain our policy space, so that we don't want to take that international obligation, so that's why we don't sign it. Similarly, when we have not taken international obligation on anything, what happens is that you have the flexibility. If you want, you can continue to follow the principles which are there in that treaty or in that obligation, but nowhere it is mandated that you need to do that. All right, so you have flexibility, right? So इसलिए हम उसको साइन नहीं करते. खैर यूपीएससी ऐसे सवाल नहीं पूछता कभी भी. यूपीएससी यही पूछेगा किया है नहीं किया है. ऑल राइट, क्योंकि इसका कोई एक्सप्लेनेशन ऐसा नहीं है जो ऑब्जेक्टिव टाइप क्वेश्चन में आ जाए, अनलेस लॉ का पेपर हो. यस प्लीज. नहीं, उसने फॉर्मली विड्रॉ करने के लिए नहीं कहा था कभी. सिग्नेटरी है ट्रीटी का, मोटर व्हीकल एग्रीमेंट का. बीबीआईएन इज ओनली अ सिंपल फ्रेमवर्क. उसके अंदर एमवीए इज बीइंग इम्प्लीमेंटेड. भूटान is a signatory of the MVA, but it said 2018 was an election year. So the concerns in Bhutan are about environmental impact of increasing vehicular traffic. Second, Bhutan का अपना सर्विस इंडस्ट्री है, अपना टूर टैक्सी ऑपरेटर्स हैं. तो इस तरह के क्रॉस बाउंड्री मूवमेंट से क्या डोमेस्टिक सेक्टर पे असर होगा. सो दे सेड दैट वी वुड नीड मोर टाइम. So they have not participated in the implementation of MVA, but they are a signatory of the MVA. है ना. तो जैसा आपने वो जो टर्म यूज किया, इट फॉर्मली विड्रू, दैट्स नॉट करेक्ट, है ना. करेक्ट एक्सप्रेशन नहीं है कि वो फॉर्मली विड्रू. इट साइंड But right now it is taking time, meaning it's open to joining the implementation at any given later date, which is very possible in all these kinds of scenarios. International relation में बहुत exception होते हैं. All right, more exceptions than there are rules, because in most of the cases there would be a tension between the specific interest of a country and any principle. So specific interest of country is practically what takes precedence. All right, even though formally we would say laws, rules, etc. should take precedence. So that's why all international treaties would somewhere or the other be limited by that respect for sovereignty. All right, so Bhutan has signed it, has not ratified it, meaning it is still a part of it, still interested, but not participating in the implementation right now. ठीक है, चलिए और कोई क्वेश्चन पूछिए पूछिए. हाँ, मुझे तो सुनाई भी नहीं दिया आपने क्या बोला. 5 eyes, ओके, मुझे वाईफाई सुनाई दिया एक बार. मुझे सुनने में थोड़ी दिक्कत होती है, मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है आजकल, तो आपकी गलती नहीं रही होगी. खैर, तो 5 eyes, अब 5 eyes फिर भी, अब देखो ये वही ये IR के जार्गन्स है जिनकी कोई बहुत ज़्यादा वैल्यू नहीं है. So if you look at United States as a power, United States has advanced the idea of security in such a way in which it first ensured its own preponderance, because that means that there is no doubt that US is the most important military power. So it has the intention and capability to defend its interests. Now in the 20th century we say the meaning expansion of American interests. So you would see as a global power, America has its interest expanding across all sectors of geography. All right, Indo-Pacific. So जैसे एक बात जो बहुत ही इंस्ट्रक्टिव है, that America's military commands are named Central Command, CENTCOM, all right, or NORTHCOM, North America, SOUTHCOM, South America. अब ये Indo-Pacific Command. So this is basically, first understand the nature of the country that we are talking about, United States. Second is, one, its own capabilities. Two, it promoted the idea of security through alliances. All right, alliance is a particular kind of arrangement between countries. And very simple idea is that India is not a part of any military alliance, right? IR में alliance का एक ही मतलब होता है, and that is military alliance. Solar alliance, generic use of the term, but जब properly कहते हैं military alliance. So you see such alliances being a reality. It's decided to intervene in European wars, First World War, Second World War. So US developed its own military industrial complex, large military industrial complex. Thereby US today is world's largest exporter of defense equipments. Also then developed arrangements regionally. For example, in Europe, it developed of NATO organization in 1949. Yeah, part of this alliance was what is called the Baghdad Pact or CENTO, Central Treaty Organization, all in the period of 1954-55. South promoted a security alliance called the SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. So these are all examples of countries have a common strategy, depending on whether they have in interest or conflict. You will see different kinds of strategic cooperation. So United States and its allies are categorized, so there is no technical basis of it in terms of 5 closest allies community of English. Cultural similarities are there, historical experience of working is there. So 5 eyes is a intelligence part of what we understand as alliance system of the US. Who are the 5 eyes? As I said, English speaking countries who are also allies of US otherwise. UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and of course United States. That is 5i. 5i के beyond आता है NATO जैसे alliances, traditional alliances. So currently NATO is 30 countries. You have getting some purpose of easing cooperation in defense strategically, and the designation was non-NATO ally. All right. So many countries like Japan, even Pakistan, is a non-NATO ally of the United States. खैर ये भी बाद में ही आने वाला था, पहले कवर कर लिया मैंने. चलिए. So that is basically the another level of allies. Now India is not comfortable with alliances, but India wants to develop its equations with US, and US is also equally interested in India for multiple number of reasons. So thereby in our case we use the term partnership. All right, alliance is like marriage, partnership is like friendship. All right, in a marriage you have a lot of obligations. आपके partner का झगड़ा आपका झगड़ा है, and that is something that India does not want. So India prefers partnership. That's why you will see India's relations, strategic relations are called partnerships, where there is cooperation, but there is sufficient degree of difference also. So these kinds of relations are based on convergence of interest rather than confirmation of interest. Alliances are based on confirmation of interest. All right, हो गई आपके सवाल का जवाब? और कुछ? और कोई सवाल किसी ने कहीं पढ़ा हो? चलिए, सो लेकिन पीपीटी इसी पे काम करता है, तो एचडीएमआई इसी से कनेक्ट करना है। प्रॉम्प्टर आप इसमें लगाइए, है ना? हाँ, ठीक है। जब तक ये स्टार्ट करते हैं, तो व्हाट वाज योर क्वेश्चन अगेन? लेट मी कम टू दैट। क्या क्वेश्चन था पहला आपका? पहला क्वेश्चन क्या था? डिफरेंसेस बिटवीन, हाँ। सो एज आई सेड, आई रेफर टू अ डायग्राम इन योर कंटेंट, राइट? इट्स सर्कल अपॉन सर्कल अपॉन सर्कल, देखा होगा आपने। So in international relations, just understand, when international relations as a discipline started, the primary problem that the discipline wanted to address was the problem of war, problem of instability. And thereby various schools of thoughts developed in international relations, but we also know that countries not only go to war with each other, but there is a substantive history of countries trading with each other. So global trade is an ancient phenomenon or modern phenomenon. On that there may be some differences among who is talking what, but there is trade going beyond border, that's a reality. Now how do you govern this? So primarily it was governed through bilateral treaties, by bilateral arrangements, bilateral agreements or mercantilist policies such as of the British Empire. 20th century saw more attempts at organizing this international trade, right? Interaction in trade. And 20th century is where you will see the liberal school in international relations after Second World War becomes important, which says that countries not only go to war with each other, but they also trade. And when they trade, it means they are developing stakes in each other. So this is the path to global stability, when countries more and more engage with each other. So when you are trading, it's a complex arrangement. You need to govern it domestically. If you have read your polity, a large part of constitution talks about trading arrangements inside the country, है ना? GST भी उसी चीज के बारे में, we are saying one country, one market. So the world is not one market, but the trade is happening in between different corners of the world. All right, and more countries have started participating in global trade. So देखो, these arrangements derived from the earlier practices when countries had bilateral agreements. Some principles developed, for example, most favored nation. All right, that ideally all countries should be treated equally, right? And other such provisions. So we say that this is about liberalization of trade. Liberalization of trade meaning, simple terms, trade becomes easier, all right, less encumbered by rules or any other hindrance. So that increasingly became an accepted idea after the Second World War, right? That globalization of trade is taking place. Now, driver of any such ideas are those countries who are early movers. So Europe or West had already early advantage because they had industrial revolution earlier. So they were the most important trading countries. So thereby Bretton Woods conference after the Second World War was about discussing economic arrangements governing the relations between countries, or the architecture of global economic governance. What came out of Bretton Woods institutions? World Bank and IMF. All right. World Bank basically focuses on development finance, and IMF is the lender of last resort, basically macroeconomic issues. All right. So 189 members, both are large multilateral financial institutions, as they are called. ठीक है, ये हो गया multilateral financial institution, meaning one idea that global financial system is becoming integrated, or at least there is such aim. But trade is always competitive. All right, when you are trading, it's not that you would always absolutely benefit. Of course, if you are large, more prepared economy, you will benefit from trade. Smaller economies would not benefit. So that's why bringing about this uniformity of institution in trade has always been difficult, right? Because as I said, there is always a tension between a particular interest of a country and larger principles. All right, how do you combine them? That's where the difficulty of international negotiations is. So for example, you would see climate change has been so difficult to address precisely because there is a significant tension between particular interests of countries and the principles they are supposed to uphold. All right. So that's where the idea was in Bretton Woods to have an ITO, International Trade Organization also. So financial institutions came up, trade institution like ITO could not be made a reality. So what came in its place? 1948, you have GATT, General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. So that is sort of codification of the principles of international trade, rules of international trade. Also, the expectations from countries in international trade, right? General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. General Agreement on Trade and Tariff moves through various rounds of negotiations. For example, Tokyo round, Kennedy round, and then after that you have the Uruguay round, which all of you are aware of. Uruguay round, 1980s it starts, and then by the end of it, what happens is there is another codification, another consolidation of these international trade rules, meaning rules governing the trade between states, not between companies, right? That would fall under another category of laws, all right, which would be basically governed by the provisions of UN CITRAL. That is another body of the UN, all right. So then what you would see is by the advent of WTO 1995, it's very clear that there is a global consensus towards liberalization of trade, removing barriers of trade. So that's why you will see GATT is subsumed between within WTO, but WTO Uruguay round also produces other agreements. So now you have trade in areas which were not earlier covered by international rules coming under international rules, which is what, that's why you hear about agreement on agriculture. All right. So that is something that is happening. So progressively, this is about liberalization of trade or easing trade between countries, because there is a normative consensus among at least most of the countries that trade is the path ahead for prosperity. So then at the highest level you have such arrangements, WTO. Now what are WTO's principles? WTO's principles are national treatment. Most favored nation is also an expectation of WTO. And also non-discrimination. All right, national treatment meaning you will treat once a good enters your market, you will treat it at par with your national products. There would not be a discrimination. But again, you understand this is only a principle. In effect, there are lot of loopholes and exceptions whereby this is not actually realized. Second thing is non-discrimination. So you will not discriminate between the external manufacturer and domestic manufacturer, all right, meaning your market is equally open to everyone. Both these principles are talking about that. But most favored nation is that if you are advancing privileges, special privileges in trade to any particular country, you should advance it to other countries also. Eventually, every country should become most favored nation, all right. So that's something that WTO wants to uphold. These are the principles, and WTO does it by a set of rules. So WTO is a platform for negotiations where rules are negotiated through ministerial conference, as one happened in June 2022, 13th ministerial conference. And then it's also a technical body, right? So it has a general body, it has a secretariat. General body also meets at trade policy review body. It also meets at dispute resolution body, all right? So this is at the global level. This is what we call multilateral rules-based trading order, all right, as represented by WTO, right? And increasingly, such bodies would aim at harmonization of trade rules among countries, but that is a long-term process. हर देश के rule एक जैसे हो जाए ऐसा नहीं possible है, because again, as I said, sovereignty comes into play. Every country would like to defend their interests. That's why so many differences within WTO. So individually, how countries do that? As I said earlier, there was a practice of bilateral agreement. These principles are codified internationally also, but there is an expectation that this is something that should happen. Countries, once they see that either country B has trade potential, or country B they already have flourishing trade and there is also future potential of trade, they would choose that country as a preferred partner for trade. All right. So liberalization of trade is still taking place, but between two countries, and when it happens between more than two countries, we generally call them RTAs, regional trade agreements, right? So this is basically happening on the basis of preference of countries. Principles are the same, all right? WTO does not say that you can't have FTAs. The expectation is that sooner rather than later, you will treat every country as such. So countries are allowed to have FTAs, right? Now, RTAs are also allowed within WTO rules. There is the flexibility. So you see, countries, when they decide to move towards liberalization of trade, what they do is they negotiate. How exactly are they going to do it? So initially, you see, you don't expect that any big bang agreement would come up. So you start with a limited agreement, right? And limited agreement of the nature of preferential trade agreement. All right. Now you decide that based on your preference of you two, some goods would be traded preferentially, meaning simple idea that some goods, tariff lines, जिनको कहते हैं, some tariff lines would be slashed or reduced. All right. So only on limited category of goods you start basically moving towards liberalization of trade. It happens through either a tariff measures. So most of the FTAs would have this provision for tariff reduction or tariff elimination, or you do it later on through devising common rules, all right, non-tariff measures. So PTAs are limited. Now when PTAs are successful, or in some cases even if they are not successful, the next step is FTA, free trade agreement. Now free trade agreement is more comprehensive as compared to PTA, right? Preferential trade agreement. Why? Because the element of preference is smaller. All right. So for example, in a PTA, countries have what is called a negative list and positive list. List of goods that they would include in the agreement and list of goods that they would not include in the agreement. In FTAs, you generally have sensitive list. All right. Every country would like to protect some sector, right, from opening up. So that's why FTAs may also have exceptions, but the larger idea is that now the coverage should be expansive. 90% of more or goods or tariff lines should be covered, right? So that is an FTA. Old FTAs were about tariffs, right? So now if you see, WTO talks about trade facilitation, trade rules. So now the FTAs also evolve. So earlier FTAs were about goods and slashing of tariffs. Later FTAs incorporated as experience happens. So from experience you learn and you revise your practices. So later FTAs started including services also. So now you have FTAs in goods, FTAs in services. All right? Because liberalization of trade in services is a challenge even now in the world. Right? We see liberalization of trade. There has been ease of movement of trade, meaning goods, trade in goods. There has been ease in movement of finance. Global finance is so integrated कि आप seconds में दुनिया में कहीं भी बैठे हुए किसी भी तरह का transaction कर सकते. So these have globalized, these have liberalized, but services, labor, movement of labor has not been liberalized. ये मुश्किल काम है. तो FTAs अब services को cover करने लगे बाद में, ठीक है. इसके बाद अब आप मान लो अगर integration is your goal. For example, some countries sign regional trading agreements because they are in a common geography. All right. So let's say European Union decided to move in the direction of trade liberalization among the member countries and also thereby integration of trade policies. So you will see that FTAs would lead to other measures, for example, formation of a customs union. Now what are you doing? You are trading with rest of the world collectively on the basis of common rules. Then it would become a common market, all right? And then European Union has moved to the extent of having a common monetary and economic union also. So that's another tangent of integration. The idea is liberalization, creating interdependence, right? And the ultimate idea is this is how the world would become stable. ठीक है? So then you have the FTA. अब उसके बाद क्या हुआ? So now you started thinking, can we have better sophisticated instruments? So you have now the agreements called CEPA, CECA. All right? So CEPA, CECA is nothing but FTA plus. There is an inherent FTA in CECA and CEPA. They are simply free trade agreements. CECA and CEPA are free trade agreements. But any definition of CECA or CEPA would say that these are package deals. What does it mean? It means within one agreement you have a coverage of goods, coverage of services, you can have coverage of investments, you can have coverage of any number of areas that you want to, right, depending on what agreement you are talking about. So it's a package deal, a combined agreement, right? Rather than having separate agreements, now you have one agreement. So it basically denotes deepening of economic cooperation a notch further than the older FTAs, right? It can have dispute resolution provisions, right? It can have competition related provisions. It can also have environment related provisions. जो आप negotiate करना चाहें, you are sovereigns, you decide what you would like to agree upon, and you can have that in that deal, right? So that's CECA and CEPA. Government of India uses CECA, CEPA interchangeably. So it does not differentiate technically between them. And unless you are a student of economics or and especially international trade, that technical difference does not matter. It's simply when you say cooperation and partnership, you simply see the cooperation में थोड़ी दूरी है, partnership थोड़ा बड़ा हो गया. So generally, technically, you will think that CEPA would be more comprehensive, CECA would be more little less limited. But practically speaking, as I have been telling you from the first class, it is not the title of the document that matters, it is what it contains that matters. Alright, so these are only agreements. तो कहीं से भी आप इस चीज को पढ़ सकते हैं, देयर इज नो टेक्निकलिटी देयर. और दूसरा, पढ़ने के लिए तो मैं बोलूंगा ही हर क्लास में ना, आप पढ़ेंगे ही, आपका काम है, डॉक्यूमेंट आपको दिया गया है, ठीक है. पर खैर, आपका आंसर हो गया या इसके बाद भी कोई क्वेश्चन है? हाँ बताओ बताओ, आगे बताओ. हाँ, तो अब देखो यार, नेगोशिएशन स्टेप बाय स्टेप प्रोसेस है. मैंने जैसे कहा, एक बार में बिग बैंग कोई डिसीजन हो नहीं जाता. तो हो ही सकता है कि आप फुल फ्लेज्ड कोई एफटीए करने की बजाय बहुत साल से हम ऑस्ट्रेलिया से नेगोशिएट कर रहे हैं. प्रॉब्लम बहुत ही सिंपल है, कंपटीशन in economy. Agriculture, dairy sector is the problem. India is a large agriculture dairy country. Australia, New Zealand are large exporters. One of the reasons why we did not sign RCEP. But for strategic reasons, sometimes you would like to expedite trade agreements. Some trade agreements are because of strategic reasons, because that country is strategically important for us. So with Australia, you understand, it's a geographically far away country. We are trying to develop relations with Australia, strategic partnership with Australia, common framework in the Indo-Pacific with Australia. So we have decided to prioritize this free trade agreement, but prioritizing the free trade agreement does not mean that you sign the free trade agreement, because fundamental issues have to be resolved. So ETCA basically can be called an early harvest agreement. Early harvest agreement simply means you make progress in the areas where you can make quickest progress, and then you continue talking about other difficult areas. All right. So sometimes you can have these kinds of agreements. So ETCA is another agreement which is about trade liberalization. It's a form of free trade agreement, but it is limited in nature. If you read the content, that is what you will find. All right. बीच में है, आगे है, ये हम नहीं कह सकते because ऐसी कोई chronology नहीं है. But we can certainly understand that trade negotiations are complex. All right. So before signing a full-fledged CECA as it was proposed, we have signed right now an ETCA with Australia. ऐसा किया है हमने. तो यूपीएससी अगर सवाल पूछता है, मैं सवाल भी इसीलिए दिखाता हूँ, तो यही पूछता है इंडिया साइंड ETCA recently with which one of the following countries. क्यों? You cannot become expert, any kind of expert of international trade, no matter कितने साल यूपीएससी की तैयारी कर लो. All right. So that's basically what you should understand. That reading the content is essential, because आप बहुत आसान सा पार्ट खुद से कर लेंगे, and that's when ये सारे क्वेश्चन निकल के आएंगे आपसे. All right. So good. Now, if the document is working, let's first start with certain questions, right? ये मैं आपने मैप देखा था, 2014 यूपीएससी का क्वेश्चन है. So I'm only showing this question so that you are familiar that these kinds of questions are also asked. All right. The difficulty in these kinds of questions is the number of variables which you have to handle, right? List upon list upon list. दिमाग इस तरह के क्वेश्चन आंसर करने के लिए नहीं बना है, ठीक है? तो मुश्किल वहां पे आती है. दूसरा जो आपकी लगातार मुश्किल है, क्या ये भी याद करें कि तरह ये भी होता है कि सब लिखना पड़ेगा क्या? तो सवाल वो भी नहीं है. इट्स अ कॉमन सेंस. आई हैव सेड दैट प्ले विथ योर एटलस, लुक एट योर एटलस. अगर आप ये एक्सपेक्ट नहीं करते कि ये बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स और पता नहीं ये बहुत ही मतलब कोई दूसरी दुनिया से आया हुआ एग्जाम है, तो आपके लिए चीज़ आसान हो जाएगी, राइट? सो सिंपल आइडिया, इफ यू हैव लुक्ड एट द मैप, आई हैव शोन यू द मैप. Jakarta here is the southernmost capital. That's why we see, that's why there is a very common category of question in geography. Line of Cancer, Tropic of Cancer passes through which countries? Tropic of Capricorn passes through which regions, which countries? Equator passes through which countries, which region? तो जब आप पढ़ रहे होते ना ज्योग्राफी, सो लॉन्गिट्यूड लैटिट्यूड में ही बहुत सारी चीजें आ जाती हैं. ऑल राइट, इफ यू अंडरस्टैंड सिंपली लॉन्गिट्यूड लैटिट्यूड, globe would become simple play for you. All right, so basic idea, closest to equator, right? Jakarta, Singapore, both. Jakarta is southernmost. I know that Hanoi is northernmost. So these kinds of questions are answered on the basis of this information. That I don't know every country's location. कोई scale लेके नाप नहीं रहा था north से south, ऐसा generally कोई करता नहीं है. But if you understand that there is a logical basis, rational basis of it, the globe is divided in terms of longitudes and latitudes for the ease of understanding, because physically the earth is so vast कि आप observation से उन चीजों को नहीं देख पाएंगे. That's why calculation and that's why these kinds of questions. तो जब आप पूछते हैं कि यार रटना पड़ता है, तो बेसिक बात है कि आप उस सब्जेक्ट के फंडामेंटल तक नहीं पहुंच पाए. ऑल राइट, वंस यू रीच टू द फंडामेंटल ऑफ द सब्जेक्ट, यू अंडरस्टैंड द कॉन्टेक्स्ट, यू अंडरस्टैंड फॉर्मूला इसीलिए होते थे ताकि आप आसानी से चीजें कर लो. तो कुछ चीजें याद करनी होती है, जैसे हम कहते थे एग्जाम में फॉर्मूला याद कर लो. अब यहां तो कोई फॉर्मूला है नहीं, सो यू विल हैव टू मेक योर ओन फॉर्मूलाज एंड वे ऑफ टैकलिंग द इंफॉर्मेशन. कैसे भी कर लो, इंजीनियर की तरह कर लो, डॉक्टर की तरह कर लो, साइंस ग्रेजुएट की तरह कर लो, आर्ट्स ग्रेजुएट की तरह कर लो, लेकिन पढ़े लिखे इंसान की तरह करो. राइट, फर्स्ट कंडीशन इज रीड. ऑल राइट, दैट्स व्हाई आई एम्फसाइज ऑन रीडिंग. सेकेंड क्वेश्चन, IORA के बारे में मैंने चलते चलते बता दिया था, हम पहुंचे भी नहीं थे वहां पे. ऑल राइट, with reference to Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation, just look at the question. Again, I am showing you the question. क्या सा क्वेश्चन यूपीएससी पूछता है, चाहे जो भी पढ़ लो. ठीक है, पढ़ने का मतलब ये नहीं होता कि केवल जो है एक मैकेनिकल तरीके से करो, इंगेज करो कंटेंट से. ठीक है, अपने ही देखो, जब ऐसा करोगे क्या होगा पता है, then your hard work would become truly visible. Your answers would stand out because you have made a practice of engaging with whatever content you got. All right, दूसरा एक पुराना फॉर्मूला जो बहुत सारे लोग करते थे, आजकल सर्विस में है वो लोग, वो फॉर्मूला सिंपल होता था यूपीएससी में कि सम थिंग्स आर ओनली टू बी कवर्ड. ऑल राइट, मेरी आंखों के सामने से गुजर गया. आई एम टेलिंग माई माइंड दैट आई हैव डन माई वर्क. राइट, सो सम कंटेंट हैज टू बी कवर्ड लाइक दैट. ऑल राइट, ये बहुत पुराना तरीका है कि कुछ चीजें आप केवल प्रैक्टिस के लिए करते हैं, केवल डिसिप्लिन के लिए करते हैं कि आई एम नॉट अंडरस्टैंडिंग इट, दिस इज वेरी डेंस, but I have the commitment that I have to go through this. So some content is for that kind of a treatment in UPSC. All right. So ये question का answer. Question, it was established very recently in response to incidents of piracy and accidents of oil spill. Very recently, कोई year नहीं है. It is an alliance meant for maritime security only. The term only. So the answer is neither one nor two. That was a year where a lot of questions had answers neither one nor two. जब आपके अधिकतर आंसर नीदर वन नॉट टू आने लगे तब भी आपको शक होने लगता है अपने आप पे. ऑल राइट, एंड दैट इज ऑल्सो यू व्हाट यूपीएससी डज. इफ यू प्रिपेयर्ड वेल और कॉन्फिडेंस है अपने ऊपर फेथ तो रखना ही पड़ेगा. जाते जाते किसी और के ऊपर फेथ रख के क्या कर लोगे. ऑल राइट, तो कभी कभी ये भी होता है, इस साल में ऐसे बहुत सारे आंसर थे जिनका आंसर था नन ऑफ द अबव. नन ऑफ द अबव आप कर रहे हैं, आपको अचानक शक हो रहा है कि यार सबका नन ऑफ द अबव आ रहा है, कुछ गलत तो नहीं हो रहा है, बट आपको करना है. वहां पे आपके पास ये थोड़ी ना मौका है कि आप फिर से मिटा के फिर से करो. यू हैव टू डिसाइड कि शक हो रहा है लेकिन आई थिंक कि आई एम राइट, आई एम करेक्ट. ऑल राइट, चलो अब IORA के बारे में दो तीन चीजें बस नोट कर लो, पढ़ने की यहां जरूरत नहीं है. ऑल राइट, क्या कुछ भी पढ़ोगे, कोई भी कंटेंट पढ़ोगे, क्या मिलेगा. 23 members, 10 dialogue partners. कल शायद मैंने 24 कहा था, आई चेक्ड अगेन, सो दैट्स व्हाई आई एम मेंशनिंग इट अगेन. 23 members आर देयर ऑफ IORA. कहीं भी लिख लो, साइड में लिख लो, मार्जिन में लिख लो, डजेंट मैटर, बी इफिशिएंट. ठीक है, इट डजेंट मैटर, पूरे लाइन लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है, कीवर्ड्स लिख लो. राइट, इट IORA फॉर्म्ड इन द ईयर, बताओ कब फॉर्म हुआ था. 1997. IORA जिसको कहते हैं, इनिशिएटिव 95 का है, फॉर्मलाइज हुआ 1997. ठीक है, सेक्रेटेरिएट एबीन मॉरिशियस, ये बता चुका हूं मैं. 23 members, 10 dialogue partners. India chaired most recently the IORA from 2011 to 2013. What is the task that IORA fulfills? मैंने आपसे शुरुआत में ही कहा था कि जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का काम होता है वो बहुत टेरिबली टेक्निकल नहीं होता है ना. तो ये क्या है, बेसिकली टू प्रमोट कोऑपरेशन इन डेवलपमेंट, सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट. राइट, ये बेसिक एम है इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का. एंड देन व्हेन इंडिया वाज चेयर, ये एम हैज बीन डिवाइडेड इन डिफरेंट प्रायोरिटी एरियाज. ये याद करने की जरूरत नहीं होती है. ऑलराइट, ये याद करने की जरूरत नहीं होती है. ठीक है, कि ये भी याद करना है, सब लिख लेना है, सारा कंटेंट इकट्ठा कर लेना है. कुछ जानना है, एम होना चाहिए. आई शुड नो द फंडामेंटल डिटेल्स अबाउट एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. फॉर्म्ड इन 1997, currently has 23 members, 10 dialogue partners, located in Aden, Mauritius. All right, and it has a track 1.5 initiative called Indian Ocean Dialogue. All right, Indian Ocean Dialogue. It's a track 1.5 initiative of IORA. Started in 2013. First IORA Indian Ocean Dialogue took place in India. All right, तो ये बस आपको जानना है. जरूरी नहीं है कि कंटेंट आप क्लास में ही पढ़ने लो, जो पढ़ के है उस पर कॉन्फिडेंस रखो. कॉन्फिडेंस अपने पे रखने का मतलब यही होता है कि आपको सब चीज़ की ज़रूरत नहीं है. वो मटेरियल मिल जाता मार्केट से, वो मटेरियल भी मिल जाता, उसके नोट्स भी मिल जाते, उसका भी वो मिल जाता. ये आपको चाहिए ही नहीं. ये आप में आपके अंदर कॉन्फिडेंस की कमी को दिखा रहा है ना, कि आप अभी भी कंटेंट के पीछे भाग रहे हैं. आपको अभी भी लगता है कोई स्पेशल कंटेंट है, आप अभी भी नहीं समझे. इट्स प्रोसेस, it's the process. Nobody can tell you what questions are asked in the examination, but once you are comfortable with the process, you are comfortable in the examination hall. All right, और एग्जामिनेशन हॉल में एकदम फ्री हो जाते हो, टेंशन नहीं ले रहे होते हो, है ना. तभी अच्छे आंसर भी बनते हैं. टेंशन ले रहे होते तो आंसर बनेंगे ही नहीं, जो आता होगा वो भी भूल जाओगे. ऑल राइट, सो स्ट्रेस मैनेजमेंट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. कर लो मैनेज. देन दिस क्वेश्चन, ऑल राइट, अबाउट एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वी हैड टॉक्ड राइट इन द लास्ट क्लास. The Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe is, UPSC ऐसे सवाल पूछता है. So again, this is showing you that when an organization, India is not a member, terribly technically difficult questions are not asked. Only awareness-based questions are asked. So what is the answer? D, right? That is correct. So this level of understanding is what is required. If you have this level of understanding, you will be able to answer many questions. All right, जैसे this question is modeled on this question that UPSC had asked in 2015. Amnesty International is. UPSC क्या पूछ रहा है आपसे? What is Amnesty International? क्या है? All right? क्या इसमें कुछ बहुत ही टेक्निकली डिफिकल्ट है? जो तैयारी कर रहे होते तो आप तो हर फैक्ट के बारे में चिंता कर रहे होते. इसलिए मैं कहता हूँ एग्जाम हॉल में जाकर रिलैक्स हो जाते हो. ऑल राइट, क्योंकि पहले ही आपने मेहनत कर ली. जो बोरिंग पार्ट था, प्रोसेस, रिगरस पार्ट, रगड़ने का पार्ट, जो एग्जाम में कभी भी करना पड़ता है, कभी ना कभी तो करोगे. राइट, तो ऐसे क्वेश्चन जब दिखते हैं तो लगता है कि टेंशन बेकार में ले रहे थे. सिंपल आंसर इज इट्स अ ग्लोबल ह्यूमन राइट्स मूवमेंट. ऑल राइट, अनलेस यू वांट टू मेक इट टेक्निकल. यू सी, सारे ऑप्शन देखो, सारे ऑप्शन में यूपीएससी कहता है द बेस्ट ऑप्शन. एमनेस्टी इंटरनेशनल वर्क्स फॉर प्रिजनर्स राइट्स. ऑल राइट, विच इज बेसिकली अ पार्ट ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट्स. ठीक है, तो ये यूपीएससी ने पूछ लिया. अब आपने कुछ ज़्यादा पढ़ लिया तो आपको लगेगा कि मैंने जो पढ़ा है वो तो यहाँ पे मेंशन नहीं है. मैंने तो ये नहीं पढ़ा था कि इट्स अ ह्यूमन राइट्स ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड कॉमन सेंस, एन एजुकेटेड कॉमन सेंस. ऑल राइट, जैसे एक बहुत सिंपल सा एग्जाम्पल है मेरे पास. जब कोई मुझसे पूछता है, जब मैं क्लास में पढ़ाता हूँ कि इसका सेक्रेटरीट यहाँ पे है, क्लास में आने के बाद कोई मुझे कहे कि सर आपने हेडक्वार्टर्स बताया ही नहीं. तो हालांकि मैं बता देता हूँ कि सेक्रेटरी और हेडक्वार्टर एक ही है, पर आपको इस लेवल का भी डाउट है तो आपको और मेहनत करने की जरूरत है. ये समझेगी नहीं आप. ऑल राइट, जब आप कह रहे हैं कि सेक्रेटरीट बता दिया, हेडक्वार्टर नहीं बताया. राइट, सेक्रेटरीट एंड हेडक्वार्टर आर वन एंड दी सेम इन मोस्ट ऑफ द केसेस. ठीक है, चलो आगे चलते हैं. ये इफ यू हैव रेड द कंटेंट you may have come across this information, right? So बताओ, all right, all इसलिए कि अब आपकी आदत बन गई कि मैं all ही सारे ऑप्शन देता हूं, right? तो इसलिए बेसिकली पूरा क्वेश्चन पढ़ें. which among the above is are not matched correctly. ऑल जिसने भी लिखा उसका सवाल गलत हो गया. इट्स अ प्रैक्टिकल एग्जांपल ऑफ व्हाट काइंड ऑफ मिस्टेक्स यू मेक इन द एग्जामिनेशन हॉल. ऑल राइट, तो पहले इस तरह की चीजों को भी करेक्ट कर लो. सो बेसिकली नन, बिकॉज ऑल ऑफ देम आर करेक्टली मैच्ड. अल मोहद अल हिंदी इज इंडियाज नेवल एक्सरसाइज विच वी स्टार्टेड recently with Saudi Arabia. Desert Eagle with UAE, we have had 2 editions so far. It's a Air Force exercise. Zayed Talwar is a naval exercise which we started recently. All right. Surya Kiran is a regular exercise with Nepal. Takes place every year, right, in Pithoragarh. तो ये भी इंफॉर्मेशन आपको ये पूरा कंटेंट पढ़ने के बाद मिलेगा. ऑलराइट. यूपीएससी में एक और आदत हो जाती है, केवल काम की चीजें बताइए. भाई केवल काम की चीजें किसी को पता होती तो मैं पेपर बेच रहा होता यूपीएससी के, है ना. केवल काम की चीजें, केवल क्वेश्चन बता दो, है ना. ये आदत हो जाती है कॉलेज से, क्योंकि साल भर पढ़ना नहीं है तो अंत में जाके टीचर इसे क्वेश्चन बता दो. ऑलराइट. तो यूपीएससी में आके ये तो तरीका काम नहीं करेगा. क्वेश्चंस कोई नहीं बता सकता, कोई नहीं, मीनिंग नोबडी. But you understand questions come from areas, so you prepare for areas, you don't prepare questions. All right, you practice through questions. चलो आगे चलते हैं. ठीक. Right. Now we had seen a map of West Asia, right? If you have read the content, I had shown you the larger map. Content में छोटा map है, उसमें भी ये चीज मिल जाएगी. UPSC first C asking is a location based question, secondly an awareness based question. So again it is not very difficult, it is Middle East or West Asia. All right. So Golan Heights is a territory which is controlled by Israel, but it is a territory of Syria, right? And it is on and off in news because it's a conflict zone, right? Because in 2018 US decided to recognize Israel's control over this region. UN condemned it, so UPSC asked it. All right. Even if that did not happen in that year, something else happens, right? So it's a conflict prone region, that's why location based questions are asked. Right. Now the region that we are going towards, Europe, Russia, etc., you have the Mediterranean region. So basic idea about Mediterranean, what kind of countries are surround Mediterranean. So you on the eastern flank have Turkey, this is Syria, यहाँ लिखा भी है Levant. All right. This is Lebanon, this is Jordan, but Jordan is not on the coast of Mediterranean. Jordan's coastline is in Red Sea. All right. And then you have after Lebanon, this is Israel. Palestinian territory of Gaza Strip is also on the coast of Mediterranean. This is Egypt, right? Then after Egypt you have Libya, after Libya Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. All right. And then here is the Gibraltar, Strait of Gibraltar. So as you exit Strait of Gibraltar, you enter into Atlantic. All right, you enter into Atlantic. See now Europe, which European countries? So you have Spain. All right, you have France, you have Italy on the coast of the Mediterranean, and then you have the multiple countries of what is this called in Europe? Balkan region. All right, right. For example, countries like Albania. Right. Now come to this part, southern Europe. Greece is also on the coast of the Mediterranean. All right, and then this is Turkey. ठीक है. And then there are various minor seas of it. If you are interested, you can go and look at it. For example, this is the Adriatic Sea between Italy and the Balkan Peninsula. All right, this is the Aegean Sea. All right, why is it important? Because as you exit from Black Sea, you cross Bosphorus. From Bosphorus, you enter into Sea of Marmara. From Sea of Marmara, you cross Dardanelles. From Dardanelles, you enter Aegean Sea. So this is a connecting region between Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. All right, and more in news, this region, Black Sea region. ठीक है. तो UPSC simply tells you कि go back to the basics and read, पढ़ना लिखना मत छोड़ो. ये UPSC आपको बार बार बताएगा. तो अब कंटेंट कवर करते हैं बहुत ही क्विकली. फर्स्ट, इंडिया इजराइल. इफ यू रेड एनी प्रॉब्लम्स, व्हाट वुड यू लाइक टू नो? पढ़ा होगा तो ठीक है. मैं 2 दिन से बोल रहा हूं तो ये आपको बताना पड़ेगा मुझे. मैं क्विकली इसको कवर्ड मान लूंगा बिकॉज फ्रॉम माई पर्सपेक्टिव देर इज नो नॉवल इंफॉर्मेशन हियर, right, which needs to be explained. For example, a term paradiplomacy. A lot of people come in the class and also ask, once and for all it is cleared, paradiplomacy simply is the involvement of subnational units in diplomacy. Right? For example, cooperation between a state in India and a foreign country. All right, in any particular sector. ये दिया definition, पढ़ेंगे तो कोई टेक्निकल डिफिकल्टी तो पता नहीं चलेगी, राइट। मेंस की तैयारी नहीं कर रहे हैं इसलिए अभी रिलेशन के बारे में बात नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि वैसे क्वेश्चन नहीं आते। एफटीए निगोशिएट कर रहे हैं, एफटीए हुआ नहीं है, राइट। सो अगेन इफ एफटीए हैपेंस वी विल include that also, right? India-Israel Industrial Research and Development Technological Fund for incubating technology startups was launched in 2018 itself. So again it is not particularly current affairs. 2018 में ही ये fund launch हो चुका है. And we have also seen from this region mostly questions are location based. All right. So you should have looked at the map. Here is the Golan Heights. All right, and you also know now the countries surrounding Israel, right? Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and also it has territories within it. These are called occupied territories. West Bank and Gaza is not occupied territory anymore. So these are part of what would be a future Palestinian state, right? So that's why you come and now see two-state solution. So what is two-state solution? It's a simple idea that the solution to what was called Israel-Palestine issue or Palestinian issue is a negotiated two-state solution, meaning one state for the Palestinians, one state of Israel, both living in peace side by side, but this should happen through negotiation. That's something that is the position of international community, that is the position of India. That is what two-state solution is. And I have shown you the question also. कि यूपीएससी कैसे क्वेश्चन पूछता है, टू स्टेट सॉल्यूशन इन न्यूज, राइट। इसमें थोड़ा टेक्निकली मैं करेक्ट कर देता हूं। टू स्टेट सॉल्यूशन वाज नॉट एग्रीड अपॉन 1991 ड्यूरिंग द मैड्रिड पीस कॉन्फ्रेंस। देयर वर लॉट ऑफ पीस कॉन्फ्रेंस गोइंग ऑन इन 1991 1992। व्हाई? कोल्ड वॉर एंडेड, राइट, यूएसएसआर रिसीडेड, नाउ यूएस has no challenges, so US is taking a proactive interest in global diplomacy, right, as part of its global power status but also as part of promoting its interests. So one of the conferences that it sponsored was Madrid conference, which was a talk between Israel and Arab states, right, because Arab-Israel rivalry is one of the traditional rivalries in this region. They have fought multiple wars. So Madrid conference happened, but the Palestinians and Israelis were talking in a secret channel at Oslo, sponsored by the Norwegian government. So in this channel they succeeded. They had a breakthrough where they could agree to negotiate. Before that, both of them, Palestinian Liberation Organization did not recognize Israel, wanted to liberate Palestine, meaning it did not see any space for Israel. And for Israel, PLO was a terrorist organization. So both of them were not talking. So this is where the breakthrough happened. That is the Oslo track. Oslo track resulted into signing of Declaration of Principles, 1993. Washington में होता है. But that track is Oslo track, right? And all these ultimately are flowing from the idea of a two-state, because in 1948, the UN, perhaps 1947, UN had passed a resolution 181. It is called the Partition Resolution, which had talked about the solution to Palestinian issue. Palestine before this was a British mandate. All right. So the issue was discussed at UN. UN came up with the formula of one state for the Arabs, one state for the Jews. State for Arabs, Israel. Israel declared statehood. Arab state could never be formed. All right. So basic idea of two-state formula goes to the UN resolution, and that's why India also accepts it. All right, that's the basic reason, technical reason for that, right? So that is something that I could have added. Rest you know. Yes. आपको क्या लगता है, उत्तर प्रदेश में एक पार्टी की सरकार, सेंटर में एक ही पार्टी की सरकार, तो अगर ये हुआ होगा, सो वी ऑलवेज यूज द टर्म गवर्नमेंट इन इट्स विजडम हैज डिसाइडेड. सो ऑब्वियस ही बात है कि एमईए और सेंटर वुड डेफिनेटली प्ले अ रोल. फॉर एग्जांपल आप कई बार पढ़ते हैं कि इस चीफ मिनिस्टर को वहां जाने की परमिशन नहीं दी, पढ़ते हैं आप, तो टेक्निकलिटीज या जिस तरह से काम होता है डिपार्टमेंट्स के बीच में, वो उस जगह पे ये सारी चीजें आर टेकन केयर ऑफ, राइट. देयर वुड बी अ नोडल एजेंसी, देयर वुड बी अ प्रोसेस. मुंह उठा के कोई ऐसे नहीं चला जाएगा और कहेगा कि आज हमारा मन है डेवलपमेंट कोऑपरेशन एग्रीमेंट साइन करने का. समझ गए आप? ठीक. तो हर चीज एक प्रोसेस से होती है, ये आप समझ लें. ठीक है. तो और पैरा डिप्लोमेसी जनरली हम प्रमोट करना चाहते हैं, ये कई बार होता है दैट आवर चीफ मिनिस्टर्स विजिट, इसको एक्सपोजर स्टडी विजिट्स कहते हैं, राइट, और या जाते हैं इन्वेस्टमेंट अट्रैक्ट करने के लिए, ठीक है। तो ऑब्वियस ही बात है, जब ये हो रहा है तो विद इन लॉ हो रहा है, ठीक। चलिए आगे, एग्जैक्ट बॉर्डर तो यार कोई नहीं बता पाएगा आपको, रीजन कल मैंने आपको बता दिया था, बॉर्डर लेवांत रीजन का नहीं है, ये रेफरेंस है उस रीजन को, राइट, लेवांत एंड फर्टाइल क्रिसेंट। तो मैंने आपको बोला ईस्टर्न मेडिटेरेनियन, यूपीएससी का क्वेश्चन भी दिखाया, यूपीएससी ने बॉर्डर पूछा आपसे, क्वेश्चन दिखाया था आपको, नहीं थे आप, मैंने कल दिखाया था आपको, और मैंने कहा था क्वेश्चन भी दिखाया था, ईस्टर्न मेडिटेरेनियन के मार्जिन पे जो देश है उनको लेवांट कहा जाता है। सो डिफरेंट कॉन्सेप्शंस, ऑलराइट, इट कैन स्टार्ट विथ टर्की, cover Syria, have Lebanon as part of it. Certainly, if you look at the Mediterranean, उसको कहते हैं ना फ्रूट बास्केट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, हिली कोस्ट भी, ठीक है, बॉर्डर बता मैं कि इजराइल के अंदर नेगेव डेजर्ट भी है, तो बॉर्डर कैसे मैं बता दूं, राइट। सो जनरल रेफरेंस है ये। सेनाई कुछ कॉन्सेप्शन में आ जाएगा, कुछ हिस्सा जो लगा हुआ है इस हिस्से से, है ना, तो ये ट्रांजिशन जोन है बेसिकली, नॉट वेरी वेल डिफाइंड। ये अब यहां देखो, टर्की यूरोप का हिस्सा है या एशिया का हिस्सा, ये हमेशा चलता रहता है, एशिया वाले उसको एशियन नहीं मानते, यूरोप वाले उसको यूरोपियन नहीं मानते, समटाइम्स इट ट्राइज टू बी पार्ट ऑफ यूरोपियन यूनियन ने टाल रखा है बहुत सालों से। सो दीज आर ट्रांजिशन रीजन, तो इसलिए इस तरह के टर्म्स है, स्पेशल रेफरेंस डिफाइनिंग द कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स, इसको कहते हैं फर्टाइल क्रिसेंट एंड लेवांट, ऑलराइट। सो एग्रीकल्चरल और हॉर्टिकल्चरल पोटेंशियल की वजह से, क्योंकि जो इसका आसपास का बड़ा हिस्सा है वो एरिड है, even if you look at the northern shores of Africa, Mediterranean generally arid है, right? So ये एक larger arid region के अंदर has been a prosperous region, all right, also. So this is the Mediterranean margin where Asia is ending, Europe is beginning, but where is Asia, where is Europe is not something scientific, ठीक है। तो जो regional reference है, लेवांत या क्रिसेंट, इसलिए कहते हैं इनको क्रिसेंट, तो उस आकार को लेके जो आप ईस्टर्न शोर ऑफ मेडिटेरियन आप देखेंगे, ठीक है, समझ गए अब कल, प्रॉस्पेरस बहुत सारे कारण हो सकते हैं, ये क्लासिफिकेशन साइंटिफिक नहीं है, सो टू से, दे इमर्ज फ्रॉम सर्टेन प्रैक्टिसेस, किताब लिखी किसी ने इस तरह से डिस्क्राइब किया, सो दैट आइडिया कॉट अप, इसलिए यूपीएससी का क्वेश्चन मैंने कहा था ना कि आप देखें क्या लिखा था, ईस्टर्न मार्जिन ऑफ द मेडिटेरेनियन। आगे बताएं, और कुछ सवाल, किसी का हाथ उठा, नहीं उठा, चलो, हाँ, तो देखो भाई, ये आईआर पढ़ाने की या कुछ भी पढ़ाने की यही दिक्कत होती है, आप बोलो कुछ भी, आपका स्टूडेंट सुनेगा वही जो उसकी मर्जी है। मैंने क्या कहा, यूरोपियन यूनियन ने टाल रखा है, यूरोप ने टाल रखा है, नेटो क्या है, नेटो कोई कॉन्टिनेंट तो है नहीं, ना कोई रीजनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, इट्स अ कलेक्टिव सिक्योरिटी अलायंस, राइट, led by US but mainly active in Europe, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, ठीक है। तो टर्की उसका पार्ट है, अब वो पॉलिटिकल डिसीजन है आप किसी चीज का पार्ट बने, ज्योग्राफी पे बेस्ड नहीं है नेटो, नाम है नॉर्थ अटलांटिक ट्रीटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, यूरोप तक फोकस्ड है, बट प्राइमरी आइडेंटिटी उसकी ज्योग्राफी नहीं है, सिक्योरिटी है, समझ गए आप। तो मैंने ये कहा भी नहीं था कि नेटो ने मना कर दिया, मैंने कहा था यूरोपियन यूनियन ने, बिकॉज इट हैज अप्लाइड, इट्स अ कैंडिडेट, बहुत सालों से ये नेगोशिएशन चल रहा है, ठीक। चलिए, तो ये मैंने मजाक में भी कहा था, वैसे तो मजाक को भी सीरियसली ले लिया, तो कोई बात नहीं, आई क्लैरिफाइड। चलो आगे चलते हैं, ये सऊदी अरेबिया, राइट, सऊदी अरेबिया। अब देखो, जैसे डिहाइफिनेशन टर्म आया यूपीएससी में, इमेजिन करो क्वेश्चन का पूछेगा, इन रीसेंट ईयर्स इन इंडियाज फॉरेन पॉलिसी द टर्म डिहाइफिनेशन हैज बीन यूज्ड इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ विच रिलेशंस, टू रिलेशंस, इजराइल एंड पैलेस्टाइन। मतलब क्या है, सिंपल, हाइफन क्या होता है, कनेक्टिंग सिंबल, ऑलराइट। सो फॉर एग्जांपल, समटाइम्स कोऑर्डिनेशन is spelled with CO separately followed by a hyphen and then so pairs are also represented like that. So that means that there is a way, hyphenation, there is a way of looking at relations connected with each other. So for example, for the longest time we said that America has a hyphenated policy when it comes to India. It's an India-Pakistan policy. right? So for the longest time, Israel-Palestine was the reference, term of reference, Israel-Palestine conflict, right? So this means that now we are saying that we don't see our relations, और ये कहने की बात नहीं, हमेशा से हम यही कहते थे, each relation is based on its own merit, right? No relation is seen through the prism of any other relation, right? So ये है कि now we are dealing with these two relations separately, right? So UPSC ऐसे सवाल पूछ सकता है, अगर imagine करो तो, Saudi Arabia, any difficulty? I had shown you the map, I had told you Rub al Khali, I had told you Jeddah, the port, all right? So अगर आपने इसको पढ़ा हो तो आपके पास कुछ मुश्किल हो तो आप बता पाएंगे, लेकिन आई एम श्योर बहुत सारे लोगों ने नहीं पढ़ा होगा. मिडिल ईस्ट ग्रीन इनिशिएटिव, इंडिया इज नॉट अ पार्ट ऑफ इट, ऑलराइट. इट्स एन इनिशिएटिव इन दिस पर्टिकुलर रीजन. सो इसमें लिखा हुआ है 2022 समिट वाज हेल्ड रिसेंटली, सऊदी अरेबिया लेड रीजनल डायलॉग ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज, इट वाज लॉन्च्ड इन 2021. इतना जानना आपके लिए काफी है, क्योंकि यूपीएससी क्या सवाल पूछेगा, मिडिल ईस्ट ग्रीन इनिशिएटिव in news recently is about, all right. So कितना भी आप पढ़ लें, मेना मैंने आपको बता दिया, मिडिल ईस्ट, नॉर्थ अफ्रीका कल ही बता दिया था मैंने, राइट. चलो आगे चलते हैं. स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप काउंसिल, व्हाट इज इट? इट्स अ डायलॉग प्लेटफॉर्म दैट इंडिया एंड सऊदी अरेबिया हैव नाउ पुट इन प्लेस. इट वाज पुट इन प्लेस इन 2019. इट हैज टू पिलर्स. वन इज पॉलिटिकल, कल्चरल एंड अदर इश्यूज, रिलेटेड इश्यूज, सिक्योरिटी, एंड अनदर इज इकोनॉमी एंड एनर्जी. ठीक है, इन दो हिस्सों पे बात करते हैं. ये स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप काउंसिल लॉन्च्ड इन द ईयर 2019, राइट. सो फार वी हैव नॉट सीन एनी क्वेश्चंस लाइक दिस इन द एग्जामिनेशन, ऐसे पूछे जाए, बट स्टिल इट इज मेंशन्ड, दैट्स व्हाई यू रीड इट, ऑलराइट. India Saudi Arabia relation key facts, as I have told you yesterday, you know about the nature of a relationship and then areas of engagement. So that's the detail which has been provided. Again, I don't have to tell you anything barring the fact ये जो यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, consistently Saudi Arabia is India's fourth largest trading partner, all right. UAE second or third, but in recent years third. China and US first or second, all right. Last year US largest, China second largest. तो ये pattern है, right. एंड जहां पे चीजें बदलती रहती हैं बहुत ज्यादा, यूपीएससी वो सवाल आपसे नहीं पूछेगा. इसीलिए मेंबरशिप एट टाइम्स इज नॉट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. 23 है कि 24 है, वो 23 का 24 भी हो सकता है, बट व्हेन द मेंबरशिप इज स्टेबल यूपीएससी वुड आस्क, राइट. तो ये भी आप, दीज थिंग्स यू डेवलप, दिस इनसाइट यू डेवलप बाय लुकिंग एट द क्वेश्चंस देमसेल्व्स, राइट. उसके बाद आप जो भी सोचते रहे, सी ट्रॉपिक ऑफ कैंसर सर्टेनली पासेस थ्रू सऊदी अरेबिया. यू नोटिस दिस फैक्ट. कल मैंने आपको ये रीजन पूरा बताया था, डू यू रिमेंबर? ओके. सऊदी अरेबिया की सप्लाई ऑफ हाइड्रोकार्बन्स टू इंडिया, 18% ऑफ India's oil, 30% of India's LPG. Largest LPG supplier, second largest oil supplier. Again, this keeps on changing, right? Iraq, Saudi Arabia, number 1, number 2. ऐसा चल रहा है कुछ सालों से. पर यूपीएससी ये भी नहीं पूछेगा, क्योंकि ये भी चेंज हो सकता है. दिस इज नॉट एन इंफॉर्मेशन विच इज फंडामेंटल एंड विच वुड नॉट चेंज, बट certainly last 2-3 years. So basically, if you see documents like economic survey, there is a chapter called external sector. All right, economic survey is a phenomenal document जिसका बहुत यूटिलिटी है, बट स्टूडेंट्स नहीं पढ़ते हैं क्योंकि उनको चाहिए समरी, समरी की भी समरी, समरी की समरी की भी समरी, और न्यूज इन शॉर्ट्स. ऑल राइट. और क्या, और बहुत सारे, कुछ तो मेरे मित्र ही चलाते हैं आजकल वो जो न्यूज चैनल न्यूज वो सब चल रहे हैं, ऐप वैप, जिसका पर्पस ये है कि 2 लाइन में तुमको न्यूज बता देंगे. नाउ गो एंड कंसिडर योरसेल्फ एजुकेटेड. यूपीएससी में काम नहीं चलेगा ऐसे, राइट. शॉर्ट का और शॉर्ट मत करते जाओ. पहले टेक अ लॉन्ग रूट, enjoy the scenic route, and then decide कि भाई these parts of the route I can avoid, है ना. तो ये चीज है. 2.8 million Indian expatriates in Saudi Arabia, meaning one of the highest concentration of Indians anywhere in the world. US number 1, UAE number 2, most probably Saudi Arabia number 3. All right. But again, UPSC would not ask this question because this is also not a fixed information. Cultural cooperation, holy cities of Mecca and Medina, that's one of the aspects of why Saudi Arabia is important. Indian Association, every year 200,000 Indians, that's the size of India's quota in Hajj. 200,000 Indians perform Hajj every year. Defense cooperation, Al Muayyad Al Hind, बात कर ली हमने. India UAE, पढ़ा आपने. Are there any questions? So India UAE relation also is very important relation. It is another strategic partner of ours. We refer to this relationship as comprehensive strategic partnership. Now the signing of CEPA is a sign of it, that we consider UAE to be important, UAE considers us to be important. Till recently, at least till the middle of the last decade, UAE was the second largest, consistently the second largest destination of our exports. US, UAE. Even now, UAE is an important export market. Till very recently, India had a trade surplus with UAE. Even now, there is a slight deficit, but the trade is by and large balanced. So it's a beneficial country. So it makes sense to develop relations with it. So we have fantastic energy relations, strategic ties. For example, if you see the meetings between Prime Minister Modi and Prince Zayed Al Nahyan, you will find that warmth displayed. All right. See, it is not about individuals. It is because UAE and India have been very special partners for a very long time, and this relationship certainly is an important one in this region. So अब हमने साइन नहीं किया इनसे CEPA. आप समझ गए CEPA क्या है? It's a package deal. It's a free trade agreement. It covers goods, services. It covers tariff provisions, non-tariff provisions, rules related provision, right? So that's where you go into the benefits of it. Once we have signed it, we signed it in February 2022. It is applicable since May 2022. What it does, so as we understand, it would have certain provision for tariff elimination. So that's the point that you see, that ultimately the 5% category of tariff, right, around 26 billion worth of India's exports, meaning substantial proportion of India's exports to UAE, is covered under 5% tariff. So this basically would be removed. So now you understand India's exports are going to benefit. As exports benefit, you understand demand rises, it would require rise in production also. Rise in production, factor of production तो आप जानते ही होंगे. Rise in production would require employing more number of people. So that is the benefit that we draw, or at least say would come to the agreement. So A, what would happen? India UAE trade would improve. So here is the data. We aim to cross $100 billion US of trade within 5 years of implementation of this. Currently the trade has been $50 billion US year after year after year. In some years $60 billion US. All right. So we are saying this would happen. Services trade would also increase to $15 billion US. Why? Because we have made such special provisions. आगे चलते हैं. 90% of products exported to India, to UAE will attract zero duty. All right. So ये है permanent safeguard mechanism to deal with sudden surge in imports of any product is also there. This is something that India was demanding in RCEP. It means that if because of duty reduction of free trade agreement, there is a surge in import of certain category of goods in your domestic market, creating domestic market imbalance or the possibility of harming your domestic producers, what do? You have anti-dumping duty, countervailing measures, but they are very technical. They have to be justified. So now you have a threshold in this agreement that beyond this particular point, the tariff provision would not be applicable. All right. So ये auto trigger mechanism कहते हैं इसको कि इसमें है permanent safeguard mechanism, right? Automatic registration and marketing authorization of Indian generic medicines once they are approved in developed countries. Generic medicine has one difficulty: the issue of standards. We have been hearing about a lot of reports of deaths of children, for example, in Gambia, in some other countries, and WHO or US inquiries have indicated the quality of the drugs provided by Indian companies. All right. India, of course, differs, but this is an important area. So you don't get to sell drugs till their efficacy has been proved, right? So that's why it's a difficult area. Brand drugs generally go through a rigorous process, generally are produced by larger pharmaceutical companies located in the West, so their acceptance is vast, right? Generic drugs are cost effective, but there is a certain distrust towards them because of quality and standard issues. All right, it has happened also. For example, what happened to Ranbaxy, and how Daiichi Sankyo, which is a Japanese company, had bought Ranbaxy, but Ranbaxy's production or products were found to be substandard by US FDA, right? तो ये जो है ये इस इशू से जुड़ा हुआ है. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि जब वेस्टर्न मार्केट्स में अगर हमारा अप्रूवल है हमारे जेनरिक ड्रग्स को, किसी भी कैटेगरी के जेनरिक ड्रग्स को. सो यूएई में सेपरेट अप्रूवल की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी. दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ इट. ऑल राइट. नाउ इट हैज ऑल्सो स्ट्रिंजेंट रूल्स ऑफ ओरिजिन रिफ्लेक्टिंग प्रोविजंस. राइट. So rules of origin provisions apply in the matters of determining tariffs. All right. So at what rate you are applying the tariff sometimes also would depend on what kind of economy you are importing it from. So for example, LDCs are provided preferential market access, and what can happen is some of the export can be rerouted by larger exporters through the LDCs. All right. So that's why we keep on talking about rules of origin. There has to be a standard through which it should be ascertained where does the product originate for the purpose of applying tariff to it. All right. I always give this simple example. This is a gross simplification, but the example is this. Let's say a mobile unit or a mobile telephone unit, cell phone unit is manufactured in China, right, by Chinese companies, subcontractors. And then after 90% of value addition, it is exported to Vietnam. 10% of value addition happens in Vietnam, and that product is finally exported to, let's say, a market like India as a product of Vietnam. So where should the origin of that product be considered for tariff? Suppose we have an understanding that since Vietnam is a LDC, so we would apply lower tariffs to it. So are the benefits going to Vietnam, or are the benefits indirectly going to China? So that's why rules of origin provisions have been in vogue. They have been talked about. RCEP, this was another bottleneck for India. It wanted stringent rules of origin. यहाँ पे rules of origin है, और ये कहता है कि भाई value addition up to 40% minimum value addition होना चाहिए for a product to be considered to be originating in UAE. All right? तो ये basically इस तरह का threshold. Customs rules में भी जो IRS बहुत सारे लोग बनेंगे, कस्टम्स रूल्स के अंदर भी ये बेसिकली रूल्स ऑफ ओरिजिन का प्रोविजन है, वहां भी एक थ्रेशोल्ड है. पर उस रूल में रिसेंटली चेंज हुआ, उसके अनुसार बेसिकली जहां पे भी एफटीए है एंड देयर इज अ रूल्स ऑफ ओरिजिन प्रोविजन, सो द रूल्स ऑफ ओरिजिन प्रोविजन ऑफ द एफटीए वुड प्रिवेल रादर देन द डोमेस्टिक कस्टम्स रूल्स. ठीक है. तो ये सारी टर्मिनोलॉजी आई. इसके अलावा फायदा इस एग्रीमेंट का ये है कि पहली बार वी हैव एडेड इन एनी एग्रीमेंट अ चैप्टर ऑन e-services, all right, or chapter on services, electronic transmission, right, transaction through electronic transmission. It is not very substantive as of now, but the only value is that for the first time in any of our agreements, we have included something like this. So it means that this is a template of now new generation of free trade agreements that India would be signing. All right, we have signed free trade agreements since early 2000s. We had signed last CEPA, CECA with Japan and Malaysia, 2011-12. And after that, we didn't sign anything. Because you see what happens. From your experience, you learn. You sign agreements with expectations, hope. But implementation of agreements may show different results. So what do? You learn. You revise the existing FTAs, and then you learn the lessons, and then you apply it to next FTAs. जो भी आप sign कर रहे हैं. So in that sense, it is also significant because this is the first CEPA signed by India after one that they signed with Japan 2010-11. All right. अब बाकी चीजें आप पढ़ लेंगे, मैंने आपको मैप दिखा दिया था. ठीक है. सो बाकी चीजें क्यों पढ़ लेंगे? क्योंकि वहां पे वही लिखा हुआ है जो एक्सप्लेन्ड है, कुछ भी नया नहीं लिखा हुआ है इसमें. चलो, इंडिया, इजराइल, यूनाइटेड अरब एमिरेट्स, I2U2. बहुत सिंपल, पढ़ लेते, काम बच जाता. कुछ नहीं है ये. I2U2 is a quadrilateral. All right, meaning dialogue between 4 countries. Quadrilateral, 4 countries. Quadrilateral security dialogue or quadrilateral dialogue between 4 countries. इससे ज़्यादा कुछ मतलब नहीं है इसका. So that's why it has been also referred to as West Asian Quad. All right, because it's a dialogue between 4 countries. So this is also a signal of changes in West Asia. What is happening in West Asia? A region which was marked by fault lines, divisions between sets of states. For example, yesterday before starting West Asia, I told you 3 axes of India's relations. One Iran, another Gulf countries, which is Gulf Arab countries, and another Israel on the Mediterranean. So each of them have problems with each other. All right, Israel, Arab states have fought wars. Iran and Israel don't see eye to eye. Arab states like Saudi Arabia and Gulf Cooperation Council countries don't see eye to eye with Iran. So this is a fractured region, thereby we have difficulty in adopting an unified approach towards this region. So when this region is changing, it opens up opportunities, right? So how did this region change? Because of various reasons, there are tensions in this region, for example, on Iranian nuclear programs. Now, Iranian nuclear program has brought together Israel and Arab states, all right? And Obama administration had preferred diplomacy. That's why JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was signed in 2015, allowing Iran to continue civilian nuclear program, but with limitations, so that it can't develop nuclear weapons. And then in return, removing sanctions from Iran. ऐसा हुआ. Israel and Saudi Arabia, for example, did not like this. So that was the commonality, right? So eventually what happened during the Trump administration, an agreement is signed between UAE and Israel to normalize relations, right? UAE recognizes Israel now and they exchanged embassies. And then this agreement was joined by some other Arab states, Bahrain and Morocco. And the US had signed this agreement because US had in a sort of a way mediated between them. Remember, Israel is an ally of US, Saudi Arabia is an ally of US. All right. So this is called Abraham Accord because Abraham is a reference to the one of the initial patriarchal figures, patriarchs as they are called in the monotheistic religions, Abrahamic religions. Abraham. Christians would call him Abraham, Muslims would call him Ibrahim, and Jews would call him Avram. All right. Shahrukh Khan ke bete ka naam. So basically, that basically is a sign that there may be much in common between these countries and peace is possible, right? So this is basically what Abraham Accords is. So when that happened, the obvious prediction by anyone would be that for India now, it may create some ease. It may open up the opportunity for trilateral cooperation, all right? Because one flank of West Asia now may become stable, Arab-Israel states. But if this coming together narrowly focuses on Iran, then India would have another difficulty because now you have these two actors coming against Iran and we don't have anything against Iran. All right. So that's the Abraham Accords signed in 2020. UPSC क्या पूछेगा अगर पूछेगा Abraham Accords were signed between, अगर ज़्यादा है ज़्यादा पूछ लिया तो, but generally यही पूछेगा कि Abraham Accords has been in news in the context of the affairs of which of the following countries. All right. तो ये अब इसके बाद I2U2 launch हो गया, मतलब now it was possible on the same platform to have an Arab country, Israel, India and US is there. So these countries came together for a dialogue. So we say that technology, trade, maritime security, energy, food processing, these are the areas where there is a potential for cooperation. All right. That is where the cooperation would enhance. And that is what effectively I2U2 are talking about. For example, US investing in India's solar program or UAE investing in food processing and renewable energy programs in India. So why we deal with countries? It's simply because we want to serve our interest. All right. It is not because I like your face or it is not because I am your best friend. तो ये IR पढ़ने का तरीका नहीं है, होना भी नहीं चाहिए. ऑलराइट, फॉर एग्जांपल कहीं कोई लिख देगा कि भाई इजराइल इज द थर्ड लार्जेस्ट सप्लायर ऑफ वेपन्स टू इंडिया, तो उसका दूसरा साइड ये होता है कि इंडिया इज द लार्जेस्ट एक्सपोर्ट मार्केट फॉर इजराइल. ऑलराइट, एंड दिस इज समथिंग दैट पीपल इंक्रीजिंगली डोंट नोटिस. ऑलराइट, सो दैट्स व्हाई दे आल्सो बाय इनटू आर्ग्यूमेंट, दिस इज अ फ्रेंड, दिस इज एन एनिमी, और ऐसा हुआ तो वैसा हुआ, तो ये किस्सा है वो किस्सा है. तो ये आप समझें कि भाई यूपीएससी की एग्जामिनेशन को हमेशा एक सीरियस अफेयर माना जाता था. व्हाई? बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली यू वुड डू समथिंग सीरियस, योर वन सिग्नेचर कैन अफेक्ट माई लाइफ. तो ये इसमें मेरा भी स्वार्थ है कि पढ़े लिखे और मेहनत करने वाले लोग जाए, है ना, क्योंकि मुझे हो ही सकता है कि आपके कार्यालय के बाहर फाइल लेके या किसी कागज को साइन कराने के लिए खड़ा रहना पड़े. ऑलराइट, तो इसीलिए जरूरी है कि तैयारी के समय पढ़ने लिखने की आदत डालने, है ना. बहुत सारे लोग अलग अलग कारणों से प्रिपरेशन करते हैं, बट प्रिपरेशन जब शुरू करो और सर जब डाल दिया है आपने ओखली में, तो मूसल तो लगेगी, तो कर लो मेहनत, या फिर देखते रहो वो सीरीज वीरीज जो आती हैं, क्या आती हैं, एस्पिरेंट, है ना। तो आपको डिसाइड करना है। चलिए आगे चलते हैं। नहीं, सबके नॉस्टैल्जिया को आजकल अच्छे तरीके से बेचा जा रहा है, ऑलराइट, और जिनको पैसा कमाना है वो कमा रहे हैं। आप देखते रहे, अपना नॉस्टैल्जिया जीते रहे कि ऐसा ही होता था। आप जो ऑपरेटिव पार्ट भूल जा रहे हैं वो था, इट वॉज, ऑलराइट, एंड यू वॉन्ट टू रीलिव दैट even while you are watching television. Well, quite an interesting life. All right. तो ये यूपीएससी के साथ कर लो, एक ही चीज को 4 बार पढ़ना, रादर देन अपनी लाइफ को सीरीज में भी देख रहे हो। ऑल राइट, यूपीएससी की चीजों को 4 बार पढ़ लो, करना ही है, ये दोहराना ही है। चलो आगे चलते हैं। भाई मिलिट्री अलायंस का इंडिया का भी पार्ट होता नहीं, मिलिट्री इश्यूज डिस्कस होते नहीं इस तरह के डायलॉग्स में, ठीक है, ये आप समझ लें इस बात को। मिलिट्री से इसका कोई लेना देना नहीं है। एक दूसरा जो आपने बोला, इससे एक और मुझे लगता है जो मेरा पेट पीव है कि होता क्या, अधिकतर लोगों को लगता है कि आईआर इज अबाउट सिक्योरिटी, ऑलराइट, और मिलिट्री, ये बॉम्ब, ये वेपन, इस विमान के इतने पंख हैं, है ना, ये तो बिना पंख के ही उड़ जाता है, ऐसा लोग वीडियो बना बना के दिखा रहे हैं। किस लिए? आप में से कौन उड़ाने जा रहा है वो प्लेन? यूपीएससी के इंटरव्यू में सवाल पूछ लिया कि इसमें कितने वेपन है, आप बोल दीजिए कि सर आई एम नॉट श्योर। नोबडी वुड माइंड बिकॉज यू आर नॉट एन एरोनॉटिकल इंजीनियर, यू आर नॉट अ फाइटर पायलट, राइट। ओनली व्हेन यू कहते हैं ना कि ओखली में सर डालना, जब खुद से आप करते हैं ना तो सामने वाला समझ जाता है कि अब इसको ज्यादा बोलने की आदत है, लेट हिम स्पीक। तो कई लोग इंटरव्यू के बाहर आते हैं तो वो कहते हैं कि इंटरव्यू में तो पता ही नहीं चलता, इंटरव्यू में तो पता ही नहीं चलता कि वो क्या रिएक्शन दे रहे हैं, क्योंकि भाई वो 60 साल से आप जैसे लोगों को ही देख रहे हैं। आपको जवानी में लगता है, जैसे मुझे भी लगता था, कि मुझसे ज्यादा किसे आता है, खासतौर पे मेरे सब्जेक्ट में, ऑलराइट। तो ये सब फैलेसीज है एग्जाम की। खैर, ऑन द लाइटर पॉइंट, कुछ और डाउट हो पूछ लो। जीसीसी मैं बता चुका हूं जीसीसी के बारे में, तो कुछ दोहराने की मुझे जरूरत नहीं। लेट्स गो अहेड। Places in news, again I will not show you places in news because I have already done the mapping exercise and it has been well explained here, right? It has been well explained here. जिनको शिकायत हो भाई आप कर लें, I am reasonably explaining कि मैप दिखा चुका हूं मैं आपको, questions दिखा चुका हूं। India, Russia, Central Asia, right? Again a lot of redundant information, but let's go through them very quickly. So Eastern Economic Forum, what is Eastern Economic Forum? Come to this. Eastern Economic Forum is Russia's forum, Russia's internal forum. जैसे for example हमारे यहाँ do we have zonal councils, नॉर्थ ईस्ट डेवलपमेंट काउंसिल, इस तरह की चीजें होती है, तो वैसे ही ये रशिया का इनिशिएटिव है अबाउट रशियाज फार ईस्ट विच इज द साइबेरियन रीजन, ऑलराइट। ऑन द वन फ्लैंक you have the Arctic, on the other flank you have the Pacific, and this is the resource rich but climatically very difficult and thereby sparsely populated region of Russia, all right. So thereby Russia, for the development of this region, to encourage attract investments, formed this forum. This forum holds a meeting, various meetings, but one of the meetings is about participation of certain partner countries of Russia. For example, 2019 Indian Prime Minister was the chief guest of the Eastern Economic Forum. 2015 में बना, Prime Minister of India was the chief guest in 2019 at this forum, and India announced $1 billion of line of credit for the development of eastern region of Russia. Right? That's the substantive information which is there. बाकी आप देखते रहें क्या है, आप मैप में भी एक बार देख लीजिएगा, ठीक है। 1/3 of Russia's total territory, तो ये है बेसिकली दिस फ्लैंक बेसिकली इज बेसिकली, तो वैसे यूराल माउंटेन्स के बाद से हम मानते हैं कि रशियाज स्पार्सली पॉपुलेटेड रीजन स्टार्ट्स, ऑलराइट। बट एज यू गो, नाम है फार ईस्ट, राइट। सो फार ईस्ट ये रीजन है, राइट। इन जियोग्राफी यू स्टडी अबाउट टैगा, राइट, इस तरह के बोरियल फॉरेस्ट ऐसा पढ़ते होंगे आप। तो किन रीजन्स के बारे में बात हो रही होती है? You will find it is ultimately about Russia. So this is the Arctic Sea, this is the Pacific Sea, right? So Russia, remember, a lot of people forget that Russia is also an Indo-Pacific country, and that's why India says not only free and open Indo-Pacific, but also inclusive Indo-Pacific. All right? चलिए आगे चलते हैं. With Russia, we have a civil nuclear agreement, latest one 2009. Result, Russian reactors are now operating at Kudna-Kulam power plant. Kudna-Kulam power plant, Russia. That's the match. All right. Jaitapur, France. These are two actively progressing nuclear power projects in India. One already in an advanced stages, for example, units 1, 2, 3 of Kudna-Kulam are already operating. 4, 5, 6 are in different stages of development. 2019, India signed an agreement with Russia for extension of cooperation in the nuclear area. UPSC asked an as it is question that this agreement has been signed between which countries. UPSC seldom asks these questions. मेरा सिंपल सलाह था, अगर आपको नहीं मालूम तो कोई जरूरत नहीं है, आप उस क्वेश्चन को छोड़ के आगे बढ़ जाइए. ऑलराइट, होता है एग्जाम में, बट ऐसा पूछा था यूपीएससी ने. अगर आप पढ़ रहे हो न्यूज़पेपर लगातार तो आपने देखा भी होगा. राइट, स्पेस टेक्नोलॉजी, ऑफ कोर्स ओल्ड कोऑपरेशन बिटवीन अस. इंडियाज फर्स्ट सैटेलाइट आर्यभट्टा, manufactured with the help of Americans, launched on a Russian vehicle. India's first cosmonaut or astronaut, Rakesh Sharma, went in space on a Russian vehicle. Right? And still we have cooperation in the area, mainly our interest in two areas of what is called peaceful use of outer space. All right, civilian use. Space is not allowed for military use as far as the outer space treaty is concerned. But the outer space treaty is limited in the sense that it does not even define what outer space is and what exactly is the peaceful use. Right? So ये जो cooperation है वो basically two areas of civilian usage of space है. One is development of our navigation systems like Navik. The more global coverage you have, the better your navigation system is. That's why GPS is so good. And Russia has its own GLONASS system. India has developed Navik and other different components of it. So both can benefit in this area. Second is India's desire to launch its first manned space flight, that is the Gaganyaan, right, which we are preparing to launch. So Russia has considerable experience in launching manned flights and operating manned missions. All right, for example, ISS, International Space Station, right? So in certain sense, Russia is ahead of US. At least USSR was ahead of US. For example, USSR first went to space, not US. US ने देखा, फिर कैनेडी साहब को समझ में आया कि अब ये करने की जरूरत है. सो कोल्ड वॉर राइवलरी, जब वॉर होता है, जब देश वॉर के लिए तैयारी करते हैं तो क्या होता है, इससे इनोवेशन होता है. नथिंग सपोर्ट्स इनोवेशन मोर लाइक वॉर. सबसे ज्यादा खर्चा किस चीज पे होता है? वॉर पे होता है, डिफेंस पे होता है. राइट, तो बेसिकली ये है. आगे चलते हैं. मल्टीलैटरल कोऑपरेशन है. चलो, क्रायोजेनिक टेक्नोलॉजी भूल जाना, ठीक है, कोई याद करने की जरूरत नहीं. उसको क्रायोजेनिक टेक्नोलॉजी में कोऑपरेशन है नहीं है, जाओ तो चाहो तो एग्जाम के बाद वो फिल्म देख लेना. कौन सी? रॉकेटमैन, रॉकेटरी. हाँ, रॉकेटरी देख लेना. ऑल राइट, सो डोंट वरी अबाउट दिस. कुछ लोग इसी को पकड़ के बैठ जाएंगे कि ये बड़ा मुश्किल काम है. रशिया has supported India's bid for permanent seat in UNSC, of course, very clear. BRICS, SCO, G20 के part है. RIC is another trilateral of which they are part. RIC is Russia, India, China. Foreign Ministerial Trilateral started in 1998. अब इससे ज्यादा तो इसमें कुछ नहीं है, ठीक है. तो इसलिए अब ये जेनेवा कन्वेंशन आए थे, कुछ लोगों को डाउट है. चलो बताओ भाई, डाउट क्या है इसमें? बता दिया था कि इंडिया ने साइन क्यों नहीं किया. उसके अलावा तो सिंपली पढ़ने के लिए. अब पढ़ोगे अल्टीमेटली तो फिर सवाल आएगा कि शुड वी रिमेंबर ऑल दिस? नहीं, सिंपली रिमेंबर व्हाट आर दे अबाउट. First of all, as I had already told you, Geneva Conventions are part of what is called humanitarian law. Law which basically aims at protecting non-combatants, meaning civilians or soldiers who have become incapacitated, all right, incapable of fighting, ठीक है, और medics who are providing services. For example, Red Cross and Red Crescent, जैसे आपने ध्यान दिया होगा. A lot of people say a lot of things कि हमने war रुकवा दिया, हमने ये कर दिया, हमने वो कर दिया. But when we had to evacuate our students from a certain part of Ukraine, which was under the assault of Russians, so of course we needed the cooperation of the Russians and the Ukrainians. But on the ground, who was there? On the ground, you have agencies like Red Cross. All right. तो basically ये जो idea है ना कि war is a cruel thing, there is a good war, there is a bad war, there is a lot of debate on that. But wars should be minimized is one, but we know that human beings would go to war. The actual problem is violence in our nature. We will fight for something. Religion नहीं होगा तो किसी और चीज के लिए लड़ेंगे, है ना? चलो अभी तो रिलीजन है, तो रिलीजन नहीं है तो कुछ कोई और चीज है, लड़ तो रही हैं हम. तो वायलेंस, it comes from that. But how do you minimize the impact of it? Because not everybody is fighting. Even if your country goes to fight, not every citizen is fighting. All right? और आपका शायद खून खोलता होगा लड़ाई में जाने के, मेरा मन नहीं होता लड़ाई में जाने का. It's a very serious business. That's why it should be left to professionals. टीवी चैनल पे जोश बढ़ाने की जरूरत नहीं है. You basically get prepared for it. Right? So for example, a person like me has no interest in war, no interest in what kind of weapons, who is developing, who is doing what, because I think these things are overemphasized. Nobody talks about the Red Cross people who are there. Nobody talks about the human rights organization, humanitarian agencies who are there. Right? हम glorify किसको करते हैं? Weapons को, nuclear weapons, supersonic missile delivery system develop कर लिया. ठीक है? तो आपको पता हो इसके बारे में, इसकी वैल्यू क्या है? unless you actually are a scientist in DRDO or you are involved in developing of that weapon system. फालतू की बात कर रहे हैं, कोई फायदा नहीं है. ऑलराइट, सुनिए उनको, है ना? क्योंकि बोलते बोलते हो ही जाएगा कि आप आइंस्टीन के बगल में बैठ के भी उसको रिलेटिविटी समझा के आ जाएंगे, क्योंकि आप तो इंटेलिजेंट हैं. आइंस्टीन बोल नहीं रहा है कि भाई मैं आइंस्टीन हूं, है ना? तो ये आदत हो जाती है, और ये आदतें बहुत जल्दी पकड़ ली जाती हैं, खासतौर पे पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट. इसीलिए लोगों को पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट से डर लगता है कि लिख तो दी मैंने बड़ी बड़ी बातें कि ऑल दैट दोज आंसर्स, इंटेग्रिटी, ऑनेस्टी, जो आप सीखेंगे, पर एक्चुअली मन में डर लगता रहता है कि ये पकड़ न लें, है ना? तो ये होता है. तो इसलिए पर्सनालिटी भी आज से बनाओ. ऑलराइट, चलिए. सो आई हैव माई पर्सनल व्यू अगेंस्ट वॉर. आप अगर आपको वॉर पसंद हो, आपको जो पसंद हो पसंद करिए, डिफरेंस ऑफ ओपिनियन हो सकता है. स्टिल you see, these kinds of laws are to minimize the impact of war, right? Efforts have been going on for a long time. So first with the establishment of Red Cross, Red Crescent, 1850s. Then the problem is, कैसे पहचानेंगे कि लड़ाई के मैदान में कौन लड़ने वाला है, कौन लड़ने वाला नहीं है? So that's why you use emblems. ये जो इंसिग्निया वगैरह लगाते हैं आर्म्ड फोर्सेस में होता, क्यों होता है? एक कारण तो आइडेंटिफिकेशन ही है ना, राइट? सो रेड क्रॉस का जो symbol है, that has been globally accepted. Why? Because of the Geneva Conventions. Then gradually, as I said, as trade laws have developed through generations, similarly humanitarian laws have also been developed through generations. So the final and most comprehensive codification happens after the Second World War, because Second World War is the most devastating war, most significant humanitarian crisis caused by human conflict that we have seen. So after that, these concerns were actually there, right? So इसलिए 1949 में ये codification होता है, and then subsequently you have 1977 two protocols added to it, and 2005 a third protocol is added to it. तो ये है Geneva Conventions. इसको समझने का सबसे अच्छा समय था जब when we were talking about Wing Commander Abhinandan. All right. So basically it is the third convention which is applicable there, which talks about POWs, prisoners of wars. Prisoners of wars have been asserted certain rights. Had Pakistan not returned Mr. Abhinandan, it would have violated Geneva Convention. That would have easily become an issue on which international community could have put pressure on Pakistan, or easily could have become an issue that could have gone to ICJ without violating India's traditional position of not going to ICJ over bilateral issues with Pakistan. All right. So ये basically these sets of rules are applicable, because आपका सोल्जर पकड़ा जा सकता है तो उनका भी पकड़ा जा सकता है. All right. So every country knows that. That's why you have developed these kinds of rules. That's why you have also developed another set of conventions, all right, about consular relations, right, about diplomatic relations. क्यों? Because हर देश अपना representative कहीं ना कहीं भेजता है. Their rights and obligations, हर देश का citizen कहीं ना कहीं है. So what is the role of a consular, right? So basically take care of the interest of the citizens of your country in a foreign country, or the interest of your country. चलिए आगे चलते हैं. ये आपने पढ़ा होगा तो बड़ा आसान हो जाएगा. आपको सिंपली याद रखना है कि A, what is this convention all about? What is it basically emphasizing? तो देख लो. First, wounded and sick soldiers during war. All right. and extends to medical and religious personal medical units also. Right? Non-combatants. These are non-combatants for various reasons. A soldier became non-combatant because he was incapacitated in war. So he's not fighting. So one who is not fighting in war, they should be separated from the conflict situation. War के अंदर ये भी ख्याल रखना जरूरी है. इसीलिए we always differentiate कि target क्या था. Violence is of course condemnable, but target क्या था? Military या civilian? Civilian targets, civilian killing, civilian being killed in conflict is always considered to be bad, worse. Soldiers are also killed, but you see, soldiers are dying in the line of duty. They are professionals. It does not undermine their contribution. But for the purpose of developing some legal understanding, you would have to differentiate. अब केवल इमोशनल चीजें करनी है तो टीवी डिबेट देख लो, बट जब क्लासिफाई करना होता है तो आपको तय करना होता है कि व्हाट कैटेगरी, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ ट्रीटमेंट, प्रोपोर्शनैलिटी. ठीक, चलिए आगे चलते हैं. थर्ड अप्लाइज टू प्रिजनर्स ऑफ वॉर. फोर्थ प्रोटेक्ट्स सिविलियन इंक्लूडिंग दोज इन ऑक्यूपाइड टेरिटरीज मीनिंग इंटरनल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स. प्रोटेक्ट्स द सेकंड वन इज अबाउट मेनली देख लो शिपरेक्ड पर्सनल मीनिंग नेवल वॉरफेयर. ऑलराइट, पीपल फाइटिंग एट सी, तो उनके लिए भी अलग से एक प्रोविजन बना दिया. एक्सटेंड्स टू हॉस्पिटल शिप्स, मेडिकल ट्रांसपोर्ट बाय सी. Now the additional protocols. 1/2/1977 strengthen protection of victims. Protocol 1 is about victims of international conflict. Protocol 2 non-international conflict. All right. अब ये international conflict क्या है, non-international conflict क्या है? These would all be a matter of debate. All right. That's why I said sometimes they may impinge on sovereign functions, and that's why it is not necessary. India has not deemed it necessary to sign these. We fulfill our basic commitments with the other ones. The Protocol 3, 2005, created an additional emblem. So there is Red Cross and Red Crescent emblem, and now it created Red Crystal emblem. Alright, so this is another insignia for humanitarian workers working in the field. Alright, so for example, UPSC ने एक और सवाल पूछा है, Medicine Sans Frontier, Doctors Without Borders. ये क्या है? सिंपल ही पूछा था. तो ये भी लोग हैं जो काम करते हैं. ये रेड क्रिसेंट के पार्ट नहीं है, बट दे आर ऑल्सो वर्किंग ऑन दी ग्राउंड. दे आर प्रोवाइडिंग देयर सर्विसेज. ऑलराइट, डॉक्टर्स ये भी काम करते हैं, और डॉक्टर्स ये भी काम करते हैं कि सुपर स्पेशलिटी, टर्शरी केयर, ये सारी कॉम्प्लिकेशन बढ़ती जा रही है हेल्थ केयर में. हो ये रहा है कि हेल्थ का केयर तो उतना का उतना है, हेल्थ केयर कॉस्ट आउट ऑफ पॉकेट एक्सपेंडिचर इज गोइंग थ्रू द रूफ. और यही सब आपको जानना होता है यूपीएससी के पेपर 2 और पेपर 3 में. ठीक है, तो जैसा मैंने कहा कि एक बार इंटरेस्ट लेने लगोगे तो एवरीथिंग इज इंटर रिलेटेड. ऑलराइट, डॉक्टर का देसी काम भी है, डॉक्टर का विदेशी काम भी है. ब्यूरोक्रेट्स आर देयर नेशनली ऑल्सो, ब्यूरोक्रेट्स आर देयर इंटरनेशनली ऑल्सो. राइट, सो ट्राई टू एंजॉय. India Turkmenistan I will not teach you because again there is nothing substantive, but connectivity projects in Central Asia is something which is of interest. Right, so India launched Connect Central Asia policy in 2012 with the aim of consolidating relations with Central Asia, which is strategically important because of location, because of energy resources. But the fundamental problem that we have is we don't have a geographical reach, direct geographical connect with Central Asia. So what do? First we make a consolidated policy, then we say that promotion of cooperation through government to government engagement, but also people to people engagement, but also business to business engagement. Collaboration in science and technology, joint ventures in the field of industry. So that is basically what was contained in this policy. Meaning, in simple terms, it was our first consolidated statement of policy towards this region, right? 5 countries of Central Asia. So thereby what you will see is, very quickly, I'm just running through what has happened. If you have read the document, you will find it. 1, 2019, we started what is called India Central Asia Dialogue, which is the dialogue at the foreign ministerial level. All right. 2020, we launched India Central Asia Business Council, which is about business to business dialogue. 2022, we conducted for the first time an India Central Asia Summit. All right. So this is how policy wise you would see our engagement has extended. So that is engaging with Central Asian countries, now the larger region. So another way of engaging with these countries is to participate in initiatives relevant in this region. What kind of initiatives? It can be regional organization or it can be projects. So we are part of SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I told you about Shanghai Cooperation Organization. याद है आपको? मैं बता चुका हूं आपको पहले ही, कंटेंट में भी है. So that is another way. Now, apart from that, we have involvement in projects like TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline. TAPI runs from Turkmenistan, the Galkanish gas field. So various estimates say that Turkmenistan has world's 4th largest gas reserves. All right. So it's a gas rich country. South Asia is an energy deficient region. So this project in one way is about connecting energy producers with energy consumers. All right. Project conceptualized and then initial agreement signed in 2010. India has a 5% stake in the project. Turkmen leg of the project is complete. Afghanistan leg of project begun to be constructed in 2015 but has not progressed. Forget about Pakistan, right? But India still is a part of this initiative. What is the initiative? TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. Then you have the Ashgabat agreement. All right. So Ashgabat agreement is what is called a trade transit agreement, meaning it aims to take forward two objectives: promotion of trade, economic cooperation by working on infrastructure. All right. So rules. So connectivity has two components. We say hardware of infrastructure, software of rules. ऐसे connectivity आप ensure कर पाएंगे, right? So that's why BBIN primarily is implementing what? Motor vehicle agreement. It is about rules. Motor vehicle agreement. मोटर व्हीकल एक्ट भी होता होगा कुछ इंडिया के अंदर, है ना? तो कॉमन सेंस, तो ये अप्लाई कर रहे हैं. साथ में हम इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलप करेंगे, कर रहे हैं, बायलैटरली कर रहे हैं, ट्राइलैटरली कर रहे हैं. ठीक है. नेपाल के साथ देखा हमने कुछ प्रोजेक्ट्स, बांग्लादेश के साथ देखा. तो BBIN को इमेजिन करते हो आप ये क्यों नहीं सोच सकते कि व्हाट इंडिया एंड नेपाल आर डूइंग एंड व्हाट इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश आर डूइंग इज ऑल्सो BBIN. All right, BBIN is what? It's simply a reference to these countries. And what is the commonality between these countries? They are contiguous geographies located in the eastern sub-region of South Asia. That is the potential that we are addressing. So similarly, Central Asia is landlocked. So there will always be an aspiration and the need for these countries to have an easier direct access to open sea. Closest sea, open sea to them is Indian Ocean. All right. So thereby what you would see is certain West Asian countries and certain Central Asian countries, right? To start with Oman, Qatar, all right, Iran, and then later on Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, these countries joined the Ashgabat agreement, and India finally acceded, meaning it put in a request that we would like to join this agreement and acceded to this agreement in 2018. So India has joined the Ashgabat agreement. And ultimately what it aims to do, it aims to promote trade and transit. All right. For what purpose? Primarily to better connect Central Asian countries. And once Central Asian countries are better connected to Indian Ocean, it means that we are also better connected to Central Asia. That's why Chabahar's primary focus is connecting with Afghanistan, but Chabahar's potential is gateway to Central Asia. So that's why I understand that we are talking, Iran and India are talking with Central Asian countries to use the Chabahar port. Why? ये स्ट्रैटेजिक इंटरेस्ट चलता है. पोर्ट के सक्सेसफुल होने के लिए कमर्शियल बिजनेस चाहिए. एक पोर्ट सक्सेसफुल तभी होगा जब उसमें कार्गो आ रहा है. देयर इज बिजनेस, right? So more number of countries using Chabahar, better for its success. Connecting, integrating various projects in which India is signed Chabahar with Ashgabat और Turkmenistan, Iran, Kazakhstan railway line, ये future है इस region का. So there is one flank of connectivity which is, since Central Asia became a part of Soviet Union, so its pipelines, its initial infrastructure is towards northwards orientation. China is a neighbor, so China also has developed its own pipelines. And China now is implementing BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and here what is called the Silk Route Economic Belt. So that is one. Now here is another set of initiatives, right? So it is not enough to only criticize what China is doing. You have to provide alternatives. So this is what in combined manner we can say is looks like what India's alternatives would be, providing alternatives to actual projects that China is building. And that's another area of movement I have been at least watching since 2013 कि ये हो रहा है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फंडिंग, ये पॉलिटिक्स बढ़ेगी. BRI लॉन्च हुआ तो ये बहुत क्लियर था कि चाइना हैज ऑलरेडी अंडरस्टूड कि दिस इज व्हाट. अमेरिका बात करते रहेंगे बिकॉज प्राइमरली 2008 के बाद क्या हुआ कि ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस हुआ, उसके बाद बहुत सारी चीज़ों में अमेरिका इंटैंगल्ड था, राइट, अफगानिस्तान वॉर, राइट, अदर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स. तो चाइना को समय मिला सोचने का, अमेरिका को सोचने का समय नहीं था. फिर डोनाल्ड ट्रंप आ गए तो शायद अमेरिका पे सोचने का समय रहा हो, वी डोंट नो, पर ये बेसिकली इसकी जियो पॉलिटिक्स है. चलिए आगे चलते हैं. तो योगा ये सब आप देख लीजिएगा. एक्सटेंडेड नेबरहुड है सेंट्रल एशिया, जैसे मैंने आपको बोला था, नेबर्स ऑफ आर नेबर्स. आई हैव शोन यू द मैप ऑल्सो, राइट. दीज कंट्रीज, तुर्कमेनिस्तान, कैपिटल क्या है इसकी, अशगाबाद. मेक अ लिस्ट ऑफ इट सिंपली. कजाकिस्तान की कैपिटल है नूर सुल्तान नहीं है, ऑलराइट, चेंज हो गया क्योंकि 2022 में नूर सुल्तान नजरबायेव वाज अ लॉन्ग स्टैंडिंग अथॉरिटेरियन रूलर ऑफ कजाकिस्तान. जब ये सेंट्रल एशियन कंट्रीज बाहर आए सोवियत यूनियन के तो इनको कोई आइडिया नहीं था करना क्या है. अब मैं भी वो कर रहा हूं जो और लोग करते हैं अपने वीडियोस में, जो विच आई जनरली डोंट लाइक, बट या इट्स सेड कि दे वर मोस्ट रिलक्टेंट टू बी इंडिपेंडेंट, क्योंकि ऐसी इंडिपेंडेंस की कोई हिस्ट्री थी नहीं. सो अब तो स्टेट बन गया, अब स्टेट बिल्ड करना है. सो मोस्ट ऑफ द ऑलरेडी एंट्रेंस्ड लीडर्स बिकेम लीडर्स फॉर लाइफ इन दिस रीजन, है ना. हर देश का यही हाल है. तो नूर सुल्तान नजरबायेव फॉर द लॉन्गेस्ट टाइम ही रूल्ड, देन ही पास्ड अवे, बिफोर दैट ही हैंडेड ओवर पावर. So last year there were protests in कजाकिस्तान. फिर उसके बाद यूक्रेन क्राइसिस हो गया तो हम वो भी भूल गए. तो उस समय नाम चेंज कर दिया नूर सुल्तान से, ऑल राइट. सो द कैपिटल इज राइट नाउ इन अस्ताना, ऑल राइट. तो ये है. और इसके बाद किर्गिजिस्तान, व्हाट इज द कैपिटल, बिश्केक, ऑल राइट. ताजिकिस्तान, व्हाट इज द कैपिटल, दुशानबे. Closest geographically to India, right across what? वाखान कॉरिडोर. ये दिखा चुका हूं मैं आपको. चलिए आगे चलते हैं. उसके बाद है उज्बेकिस्तान. उज्बेकिस्तान कैपिटल इज ताशकंद, ऑल राइट. एंड देन तुर्कमेनिस्तान हम बात कर चुके हैं. अब उज्बेकिस्तान के बारे में स्पेशल क्या है, इट इज द सेकेंड, मीनिंग one of the only two doubly landlocked countries. One is Liechtenstein in Europe, and another is Uzbekistan. Doubly landlocked means that not only that country is landlocked, but countries surrounding it are also landlocked. And what is a landlocked country? Simple, a country which does not have access to open sea. सब बहुत बार कई लोग पूछते हैं कि ऐसा कैसे कह सकते हैं आप. आदत होती है कि हमको तो सवाल पूछना ही है, तो कहते हैं कि ऐसे कैसे कह सकते हैं. कैस्पियन सी तो है. कैस्पियन सी इटसेल्फ इज एन इनलैंड सी, इट्स नॉट एन ओपन सी, है ना. तो कैस्पियन सी बस बड़ा तालाब है ना, नाम में सी है. सो दैट्स समथिंग दैट यू शुड अंडरस्टैंड, दैट इट्स एन इनलैंड सी, इट्स इटसेल्फ इज लैंडलॉक्ड. सेंट्रल एशिया इज लैंडलॉक्ड. उज्बेकिस्तान इज लैंडलॉक्ड बिटवीन लैंडलॉक्ड कंट्रीज, राइट. दैट्स व्हाई डबली लैंडलॉक्ड. ठीक है. चलिए अब आप देख लीजिएगा दूसरा कॉन्सेप्शन जो मैं आपको सिखा चुका हूं, वो क्या है. अब देख लें इस रीजन में किसका बॉर्डर किसके साथ है. ऑल राइट. टू द नॉर्थ रशिया, टू द ईस्ट चाइना, टू द साउथ साउथ एशिया एंड वेस्ट एशिया, ऑल राइट. एंड टू द वेस्ट रशिया एंड कॉकेसस रीजन, राइट, इंक्लूडिंग द कैस्पियन सी. चलो आगे चलते हैं. इंटरनेशनल नॉर्थ साउथ ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉरिडोर की बात कर लेते हैं. ये है इंटरनेशनल नॉर्थ साउथ ट्रांसपोर्ट कॉरिडोर. व्हाट इज इट? इट्स बेसिकली अ प्रपोज्ड प्रोजेक्ट अंडर एन एग्रीमेंट साइंड प्राइमरली बिटवीन थ्री कंट्रीज, conceived by three countries: India, Iran, Russia. They signed an agreement to this effect in the year 2000. What was the aim? The aim was to develop alternative connectivity routes, right? So if you see, traditional trade from India to Russia would take this route: Indian Ocean, Red Sea, Suez, Mediterranean, Gibraltar, Atlantic, North Sea, English Channel, North Sea, Baltic Sea, St. Petersburg. It's a long route, so thereby it adds to the cost of trade. Trading becomes costlier. If you have to make trade efficient, you try to cut down on the cost. One of the ways is to cut down the number of days it takes for a consignment to move from one source to another. So that's why this route, Indian Ocean, western part of India, Indian Ocean, port of Bandar Abbas, meaning Iran, and then from Iran to Caspian Sea, this is Baku, another prominent port, terminus in and well-developed infrastructure in Caspian region. All right, and through the Caspian region, this is Astrakhan. So this is on the river Volga. All right, UPSC keeps on asking, this river discharges into Volga, discharges into Caspian Sea. Volga फिर पहुंच गया रशिया, रशिया के अंदर पहुंच गया अगर नॉर्थ रशिया, सेंट पीटर्सबर्ग. इट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट सिटी एंड बैकड्रॉप ऑफ मेनी ऑफ द नॉवेल्स ऑफ, कौन था वो, दोस्तोयेव्स्की. सुना है नाम आपने? क्राइम एंड पनिशमेंट. बहुत सारे बोरिंग बोरिंग नॉवेल लिखे हैं उन्होंने, बहुत मोटी मोटी किताबें, बहुत ही छोटे छोटे फॉन्ट में, पढ़ने में तो दिक्कत आएगी, बट बचपन से लक्ष्मी गांधी पढ़ रहे, बचपन से लक्ष्मी गांधी पढ़ रहे. तो देखो, टाइम नहीं लगा तो इसका मतलब ये बोलो ना, पढ़ने का शौक नहीं है, इसमें कोई बुराई नहीं है. ऑल राइट, सो रशिया. अब यहां पहुंच गए तो पोटेंशियली नॉर्थ यूरोप पास हो गया, यानी कि पोटेंशियली इट वुड ऑल्सो पोटेंशियली रिड्यूस टाइम टेकन टू एक्सपोर्ट टू यूरोपियन मार्केट्स, राइट, provided there is stability. So this is INSTC. समझ गए आप? 13 more countries have joined it, 11 more countries have joined it basically after that. So अब इतने लोग इसमें participate कर रहे हैं, but you just remember it's basically an agreement between India, Russia and Iran. Other countries can keep on joining. It has not been launched as yet, but certainly exporters have started using this route. Interestingly, they are using the Chabahar port also, and they are saying that जो काम करने में लगभग 30 दिन लगते थे वो काम 4 दिन में हो जा रहा है. ऑल राइट, मीनिंग कि जो एक्सपोर्ट का पूरा प्रोसेस, तो इनफॉर्मली तो बहुत सारे लॉजिस्टिक्स कंपनीज यूज कर रहे हैं, फॉर्मल लॉन्च बाकी है इसका. इट्स अनदर एग्जांपल ऑफ इंडियाज कनेक्टिविटी प्रोजेक्ट, राइट. चलो कंटेंट बाकी पढ़ लेना, क्योंकि मेंस की तरीके से लिखा हुआ, जो पीटी के हिसाब से इंपॉर्टेंट मैं बताया. चाबहार डे, चाबहार के बारे में मुझे बताने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है, आपको मैं बता चुका हूं. ये चाबहार पोर्ट है, मैंने आपको क्वेश्चन भी दिखाया था अगर आप याद करेंगे. चाबहार पोर्ट इज बेस्ड ऑन ट्राइलैटरल एग्रीमेंट बिटवीन इंडिया, अफगानिस्तान एंड ईरान 2016, operationalized in 2018. India Ports Global Limited is the entity which operates this port. All right, and there are two ports in Chabahar. One is called Shahid Kalantari, another is called Shahid Beheshti. So our operations are at the port called Shahid Beheshti. All right, Shahid Beheshti port. That's why you will find Shahid Beheshti port mentioned at a lot of places. So unless you point out any problems from this part of the content, I will move ahead. CIS, right? Commonwealth of Independent States. This is one of the organizations which came out after the collapse of Soviet Union. So these are post-Soviet states wanting to maintain cooperation and perhaps in the future extend cooperation, forming this organization, CIS, right? Commonwealth of Independent States. It is different from the Commonwealth, right, as we call it, the Commonwealth. All right. So the Commonwealth of Nations is basically an organization based in London. It came into its correct form in 1949. It has around 54 countries as its member. India is a member. All right. So that is a different organization, but since India is a part of it, we give more value to it. But since Russia is in news, we mentioned this here as well. Now, Kaladan Multimodal Project or IMT highway, I have already talked about. Mekong India Economic Corridor is proposed, जैसा यहाँ लिखा हुआ है, पर मेकोंग गंगा कोऑपरेशन में आपको समझा चुका हूँ. स्टिलवेल रोड, स्टिलवेल रोड सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर की बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट रोड है. Americans and the Britishers had built it to aid supply effort in China, whereas Japanese were fighting, right? Japanese were in China. So this is an important road of that point in time, that always the idea is to improve it, right? One idea was, let's have what is called the BCIM corridor, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar corridor. 1999 के आसपास हमने discuss किया था, and it was based mainly on this Stilwell-Ledo road. This project is no more active. After 2013, India has not taken active interest, all right? Or Delhi-Hanoi railway link again proposed. Tamu Kalewa Kalemeo Friendship Road, 160 km cross-border road from Tamu to Kalmeo in Myanmar, Sagyang region, and forms part of India-Myanmar Thailand trilateral highway. क्यों ये mentioned है, इसको मैं बता देता हूँ. Because ये बहुत सारा road component in Myanmar we are implementing through our aid, so that we can make progress, right? Because Myanmar's infrastructure is very outdated, dating back to, in some cases, some of the bridges meaning strategic bridges, जो jungle से और difficult terrain से जा रहे हैं, they date back to the Second World War. All right. So if you want to have better connectivity with Southeast Asia, we would have to work in this region. चलो आगे चलते हैं. Places in news again मैं कहूँगा आप खुद देख लें, क्योंकि explained है. अब यहाँ पे हम आते हैं और इसके बाद हम चलते हैं on the map. All right. सो मैप में जनरली हमने यूरोप देख लिया, वेस्ट एशिया देख लिया, इंडिया देख लिया, राइट? ये ब्लैक सी रीजन है. ब्लैक सी रीजन हैज बीन इन न्यूज बिकॉज ऑफ रशिया यूक्रेन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट. द एग्जांपल ऑफ लास्ट ईयर और एनी ईयर टीचर्स अस व्हाट, व्हेन देयर इज अ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट यूपीएससी वुड गो टू बेसिक्स. ऑल राइट, वन ऑफ द बेसिक्स इज लोकेशन. And what kind of location? Generally these are prominent locations like Black Sea, right? So first of all, which countries surround the Black Sea is a very simple question that all of you can answer. So here is Russia, right? Then after Russia you have Ukraine, right? After Ukraine you have Romania. Moldova has some port arrangements, but Moldova is not generally considered to be a Black Sea coastal country. It is Black Sea adjacent country. All right, Romania, and then there is Bulgaria, and then this is Turkey. So these are the countries surrounding Black Sea. Pehla, क्योंकि that conflict has been in news. Second, if you are interested, I have already told you, from that Bosphorus and Dardanelles. अगर conflict हो या conflict ना हो, they are always important in world geography, or generally, right? As I told you yesterday, that UPSC asked a question in the mains examination: the significance of straits and isthmus in international trade. Primarily one of the significance is international trade. So यहाँ पे हमने देख लिया ये Bosphorus, Black Sea to Sea of Marmara, Dardanelles, Sea of Marmara to Aegean Sea. All right, ये हो गया. Now you see Danube. Danube empties into Black Sea. All right, Dnieper. All right, the Dnieper river, that basically also empties into Black Sea. It flows from Russia, right? It originates around the Valdai mountains of Russia, and then it flows in Belarus, and then it comes to Ukraine, and then it goes to the Black Sea, right? This is Sea of Azov, a marginal sea of Black Sea, and this is the Kerch Peninsula. So this is the Kerch Strait. Was in news because a bridge was destroyed, right? तो bridge destroyed तो क्या हो गया? रशिया ने कब्जा कर लिया. It has created a land bridge to Crimea. That's basically one of the territorial objectives of a war, right? तो पर ये न्यूज में था कर्च स्ट्रेट, ठीक है? याल्टा कॉन्फ्रेंस, ठीक है? याद है याल्टा कॉन्फ्रेंस आफ्टर द सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर, राइट? तो ये पुराना पोर्ट है. ओडेसा, एक फिल्म है ओडेसा फाइल्स, राइट? So that is also the port in Black Sea, a resort town. It used to be a resort town, Odessa or Yalta, during the Soviet period, right? For the, क्योंकि ठंड बहुत पड़ती है, अब उसके बाद वो गोवा आने लगे, right? So this is the region. अब इसके अंदर आपको जितना जाना आप जाते जाएं, ठीक है? So in the conflict, what has happened? Russia has annexed certain regions. What regions? Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye. there was a long standing battle for a port city called Mariupol. तो अब आपको समझ में आ गया कि साल भर अखबार पढ़ रहे हो तो ये नाम तो सुने ही होंगे. तो यूपीएससी सवाल पूछ लेगा, कंसिडर द फॉलोइंग पेयर्स, रीजन इन न्यूज कंट्री और रीजन इन न्यूज कंट्री, यस, ऐसे सवाल पूछ लेगा, राइट. हैं तो अभी भी यूक्रेन में, बिकॉज इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी ने एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया है वो अनेक्सेशन. ऑलराइट, रशिया हैज अनेक्स्ड दीज रीजन्स, राइट. तो यूपीएससी जब सवाल पूछता है तो ऐसे सवाल पूछता है ना, और वो बॉक्स पढ़ लेंगे अगर तो सारी इंफॉर्मेशन साथ में दी हुई है, जिसको जिस तरीके से सीखना है ना. अब यूपीएससी सवाल कैसे पूछता है वो एग्जाम्पल देख लो, राइट. सो दैट a lot of times UPSC preparation is about entitlement, that I am entitled to something. In life nobody is entitled, all right. Nobody is entitled to absolutely anything apart from, if you are a human being, to basic human dignity, all right, and your basic needs. तो entitlement से application के through you basically acquire, जिसको कहते हैं पात्रता, कि आप योग्य भी हैं इस एग्जाम को देने के. बहुत सारे लोगों को ये बातें बुरी लग जाती हैं, वो आपकी पर्सनालिटी का एस्पेक्ट है, वो आपको एड्रेस करना है. बट दिस इज समथिंग दैट आई फील आई एम टेलिंग यू. सो क्वेश्चन इसलिए देखना है. तो क्वेश्चन आपको बहुत ही सिंपली हम्बली बता देता है, आपको हम्बल कर देता है. आपको जितनी भी जानकारी आती हो आपको लिखना आंसर जनरल स्टडीज के लेवल पे, ऑल राइट, मेंस में भी. और आपको जितना भी आता हो, डोंट वरी, दीज क्वेश्चंस हैव टू बी आंसर्ड. आपके पास 25 डिग्री होगी, लेकिन कोई 1 डिग्री वाला भी ये क्वेश्चन आंसर कर सकता है. So that is how UPSC generates confidence in you. But unfortunately people don't talk about this. People are these days on the mode of motivation, है ना, motivational speakers. For मेरे लिए motivational speakers कौन से अच्छे हैं? रिचर्ड फाइनमैन. रिचर्ड फाइनमैन साहब जो है वो कितनी बढ़िया बढ़िया बातें कह के गए, है ना. अगर आप उनको पढ़ें तो ये बेसिक बात इस चीज से रिलेट करने के लिए, बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं कहानी सुनाइए, जोक सुनाइए, इसकी कोई जरूरत नहीं है, ये क्वेश्चन ही कह रहा है अपने आप में सारी बातें. ऑलराइट, कहानी और जोक ऐड करो तो मेरे हिसाब से 5 मिनट और वेस्ट होते हैं, ठीक है. बट ये पॉपुलैरिटी, नहीं ब्रेक आज भी नहीं दूंगा मैं. आप ब्रेक का तरीका एक बहुत सिंपल सा है, बता देता हूं मैं. वीडियो भी ये सारी चीजें, कुछ लोग वीडियो पे देख रहे हैं, आप अपने हिसाब से ब्रेक ले लीजिए. क्लास में जो बैठे हैं उनके लिए बहुत सिंपल सा तरीका, ब्रेक की जरूरत पड़ती है तो एक एक करके जाए, क्योंकि एक बार भी ब्रेक देता हूं अगर मान लो तो इतनी तो फैसिलिटीज नहीं है कि सारे लोग यूज कर पाएंगे, ठीक है. आप ब्रेक ले लें, आपका कुछ नहीं छूटेगा. दिस इज समथिंग दैट यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड. मेरी चिंता है, सिलेक्शन के बाद देखेंगे, सिलेक्शन के बाद मेरी चिंता करना तो मैं भी बहुत खुश होऊंगा. अभी चिंता करें क्या करोगे, अभी अपनी करो, है ना. चलो ब्रेक ले लो खुद से, यू विल नॉट बी मिसिंग एनीथिंग, आई विल नॉट स्टॉप, है ना. चलिए आगे चलते हैं. 1, 2 मिनट 5 मिनट का ही ब्रेक लगेगा ना, वरना ब्रेक जब दो लोग कहते हैं 10 मिनट का ब्रेक चाहिए. समझदारी से ये काम करते हैं या एक एक करके. तो ये वही मैप है जो मैंने आपको अभी दिखाया. अब ये क्या है, ये और डिटेल्ड मैप है. तो अगर आपका शौक है और डिटेल्ड स्टडी कर रहा है तो आप कर लें, कोई नहीं रोक रहा है आपको, ये सारे मैप्स अवेलेबल हैं, राइट. लेकिन अगेन जैसे मैंने कहा, तो मारियूपोल, दोनेस्क, जाफरोजिया लगातार न्यूज में आ रहे हैं. So that means this is basically what you have to focus on, right? Apart from that, you can see the Karkinith Bay, Kerch Strait बता चुका हूँ, Sea of Azov, Taganrog Gulf. These are all marginal parts of Black Sea. पर होता ही है कि जितना आप डिटेल में जाते जाते हैं आप टाइम वेस्ट कर रहे होते हैं, बिकॉज थोड़ा कॉन्सेंट्रेटेड समय किसी भी चीज में स्पेंड करके आप एडिक्वेट इंफॉर्मेशन ऑलरेडी गैदर कर चुके हैं, ठीक है. तो बियॉन्ड अ पॉइंट जस्ट अंडरस्टैंड कि इज इट वर्थ इट, स्पेशली व्हेन आई हैव डेप्थ ऑफ टाइम, शुड आई बी डूइंग इट, ये हमेशा याद रखना. अदरवाइज जैसे मैंने कहा इन्फॉर्मेशन है. अब इसमें ट्रेड वेड की बहुत बातें थी, डिफेंस ट्रेड ये वो. सो रशिया के साथ हमारा ट्रेड इस साल तो 40 बिलियन क्रॉस कर चुका है, साल पूरा होने से पहले ही, बिकॉज दिस इज एन एबनॉर्मल ईयर. जनरली आवर ट्रेड हैज बीन लो, 7 to 11 बिलियन US dollars, राइट. arm trade is not generally accounted with the normal trade figures, ठीक है. तो दोनों ही नंबर्स हैं. एक तो रशिया के साथ जनरली ट्रेड कम रहा है, इस साल ज्यादा हो गया है. सेकेंडली, इन एनर्जी ट्रेड रशियाज शेयर दिस ईयर हैज रिजन एंड कंसिस्टेंटली इन मल्टीपल मंथ्स. रशिया हैज बीन आवर लार्जेस्ट ऑयल सप्लायर. So it would not be a surprise that at the end of this financial year, where all the full data is available, Russia would be our largest oil supplier. But that is not a trend. That is only an event of a particular year, right? तो ये basically कुछ data है. अब इस data में मेरा interest है. Not weapons types, weapons categories क्या होती है. It's too technical. That's why I don't have interest, क्योंकि फायदा नहीं है. अब मैं सीख भी नहीं सकता बहुत ज़्यादा. But ये जो data है आपके काम आता है. कहाँ? Paper 3, Paper 1, wherever you would like to use it, right? So SIPRI, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, it's a very credible institution, think tank, when it comes to defense data, defense numbers. Two things that you should try and remember. One, every year budget comes, just check what is the defense spending of India. अगर उसके अंदर भी जाना चाहते हो, just see what is the capital expenditure therein, all right? और दूसरा, SIPRI, right? Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Their data is a credible data. Fortunately, this data has come in March, so I can talk about this data. है ना? ये current affairs जो हम cover करें उसमें covered नहीं है, but it just extends value addition. So if you see, this is the pattern. India remains biggest arm importer between 2018 to 2022. Largest arm importer in the world. Have you seen a lot of Indian companies are now entering into defense manufacturing? Why are they doing that? और ये यूपीएससी प्रिपरेशन का फायदा होता है. मैक्रो इकोनॉमी एक बार समझ जाओगे तो शेयर बाजार में भी और कमोडिटी ट्रेडिंग में भी शायद कुछ मदद मिल जाए. कई स्टूडेंट आते हैं और कहते हैं कि आप क्यों नहीं करते, क्योंकि पढ़ाना और वो ट्रेड करना दोनों अलग अलग चीजें, इसलिए मैं नहीं करता, है ना. बट फिर भी, सो यू सी इंडिया, वी से वेरियस रिपोर्ट से 150 बिलियन कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर की अपॉर्चुनिटी एंड डिफेंस. Why? It's obvious like that a country like India would continuously modernize its defense forces. No matter who is in power, who was in power, who will be in power, this is something fundamental. All right? And this is also shown in numbers. All right? First, you would import because manufacturing is difficult. Since 2000 at least, successive governments have had defense procurement, defense manufacturing policy. Right? So, arms imports have dropped. This is another part of the pattern, 11% between 2013, 17, 2018, 22. Now, it's not very clear whether they are talking about the value or they are talking about the volume, but generally we simply say value, so I'm assuming the value. It can be because of various reasons. It can be because maybe we have started manufacturing more, all right, or maybe in general we have not bought a new weapon system, because S400 is also a deal dating back to 2016, all right, the talks dating back to 2013, right? But still, Russia was the largest supplier of arms to India in both 2013-17, उस period के लिए 4 साल के और अगले period के लिए भी. But what has happened? It's very, very clear. Russia's share in India's arms imports is falling. So we have two very instructive numbers. From 1960s to 1991, Russia's share in India's arms export was around 66%. From 1992 to about 2015, its share was again 64%. So it is no doubt that it has been an important pillar of our relation with Russia. Russia is our arms supplier. But it is also very clear that supply chain bottlenecks are evident. Similarly, the class and design of the kind of weapon systems or military system that we want may not be available only with Russia. So we would have to buy it from others. So this is called diversification. All right, either you produce yourself or you diversify. That makes sense, because if you rely on any one large supplier, any supply shock would be detrimental. At least military के मामले में तो बड़ा ही मुश्किल हो जाएगा, क्योंकि अचानक से procure नहीं कर सकते. So then you see it has dropped, but dropped from 64% to 45%. So that means still Russia is a substantial supplier, though the trend is that this number would increasingly go down. It would go down for two things. One, India would continuously work on indigenization of defense manufacturing, right? Two, India would be continuously buying from newer kinds of partners. It's very visible. France is India's second largest arms supplier, 2012. Rafale, Scorpion class submarines. All right, these are only some examples of what we are buying from France. But older Mirage planes, we have also procured from France. And various parts of avionics or electronics and communication systems, radar systems. These are some of the things that generally we don't even talk about. But certainly France. For the same period, India remained the largest arms importer, followed by Saudi Arabia. All right. So generally you will see in some periods Saudi Arabia imports the largest. किससे खरीदता है? Mainly US से. All right. Now in this period 18 to 22, India is the largest arm importer. Second largest is Saudi Arabia. Russia 45% of India's import, 29% France, US 11%. These are top 3 of the arm suppliers to India. India biggest arms export market to 3 countries, Russia, France, Israel, right? Meaning ये data क्या कह रहा है कि किन के लिए हम सबसे बड़ा export market है? For Russia we are largest export market, for France we are largest export market, for Israel we are largest export market, not for US. We are not the largest export market. So that is another way in which you can look at data, right? These are various interpretations, right? Same data set से बहुत सारे interpretation आप निकाल सकते हैं. India was the biggest arm export market to 3 countries. Russia, इसके बाद का point, India was also the 3rd largest market for South Africa. All right. So South Africa से भी हम खरीद रहे हैं. South Africa is 21st in the ranking of arms exporters. India also, previous report, India was 25th, meaning India had entered into top 25. So for example, Myanmar, we have provided it torpedo systems, we have sold it submarine, all right. Mauritius, we supply, Sri Lanka, we supply, Nepal, we supply. There are a lot of countries, specifically in the developing world, where our products are of interest. In South America, we have a large potential market. In Southeast Asia, we have a large potential market. For example, one thing which made news was Philippines, India deal for BrahMos. All right. At very initial stages, let's see what happens. So, ये है overall the US share. Now, global data. US share of global arms exports increased from 33% to 40%. All right. While Russia's fell from 22% to 16%. So, these are top 2 arms exporters, arms producers, right? So you have global data, you have India specific data. This is pattern. All right. Once you learn this information, first of all, it would aid in your analysis, it would aid in your reading. All right. तो जो लोग लिख भी रहे हैं अखबार में वो भी ये sources use करते हैं. ठीक है. So in UPSC also you can identify some data sources which you can quote consistently depending on what area of question are you looking at. चले आगे. ये रशिया से आया था, रशिया क्योंकि हमने डिस्कस किया. अब ह्यूमैनिटेरियन लॉ मैं ऑलरेडी डिस्कस कर चुका हूं. ओरिजिनल जेनेवा कन्वेंशन 1864, ठीक है. देन कंसोलिडेटेड 1949, ये मैंने बता दिया. जेनेवा कन्वेंशन किस बारे में है, किसी भी तरीके से समझ लो. इट्स अ सीरीज ऑफ ट्रीटीज ऑन द ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ सिविलियंस or prisoners of wars and soldiers who are otherwise rendered incapable of fighting. That can be your simple understanding, right? चलिए आगे चलते हैं. तो कौन कौन से हैं? तो पहला तो ये 4 जेनेवा कन्वेंशंस आपने खुद देख लिया. मैंने क्या कहा था, ये समझो किस बारे में. फर्स्ट किस बारे में? wounded and sick. सेकंड किस बारे में? wounded and sick but at sea. All right. And third is about treatment of prisoners of war, right? Fourth is about protection of civilian persons in time of war. 4 हैं, एक ही साल के हैं, तो साल याद करने का तो कोई झंझट ही नहीं है. India is a signatory, so we should remember it. And protocols not so important because India has not signed it, but we generally remember there are 3 protocols. 1977 2 and 2005 another protocol is added, right? चलिए आगे चलते हैं. चाबहार देखा आपने, यूपीएससी ने क्या सवाल पूछा, ये मैं आपको पहले दिखा चुका हूँ, यही वाला सवाल. तो just for reminding you that we have also covered Chabahar. Let's move forward. Now let's go towards Indo-Pacific. All right. तो Indo-Pacific के लिए हम जाते हैं. US भी आ जाएगा, उसमें बहुत सारी चीजें और आ जाएंगी. चलो Indo-Pacific. अब इसमें US से शुरू कर रहे हैं, कोई बात नहीं, शुरू करना चाहिए था साउथ ईस्ट एशिया से, बट साउथ ईस्ट एशिया हम जा चुके हैं. तो US is a key proponent of the idea of Indo-Pacific. US is one of those countries which has been consistently using the term Indo-Pacific and in a sense making it a focus of its strategic policy going forward. There are various reasons. Asia Pacific itself is economically a vibrant region. Asia Pacific is seeing the rise of multiple capable countries, India, China, Japan, many of the Southeast Asian countries, Australia. And Indo-Pacific is where the next significant systemic challenge to the US and its preponderance, supremacy, dominance, or hegemony, whatever term you would like to use, in global politics is going to come from. So because of these reasons, Indo-Pacific has been in news, has been talked about, but Indo-Pacific is a very new term. That's why most of the sources say Indo-Pacific is a new term of reference. It's a new strategic theater, right? So Indo-Pacific, remember, lies in geography. It simply means Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean are linked entities. They should be seen as such. There are opportunities and challenges common to actors present here, actors interested here, right? That's the idea. India says ASEAN or Southeast Asian countries is where the Indo-Pacific actually meets, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean meets. So India says ASEAN centrality is one of the aspects of its Indo-Pacific approach. India then says that Indo-Pacific, the idea of Indo-Pacific is not a club of limited number. It is not something to be dominated by. It is an idea which is based on cooperation. It is a space for everyone, right? So then India also says that when we talk about Indo-Pacific, there is a concern for rules-based architecture, rules-based order, meaning conduct of countries should be guided by commonly agreed upon rules and institutions. All right, that is rules-based order. So that means there are a lot of issues in this region, maybe issues of trade, but primarily we see this in terms of issues of maritime domain. All right, basically principles like right to innocent passage, or what we call generally freedom of navigation, freedom of overflight, freedom of unimpeded lawful commerce. तो ये सुरक्षित रखना जरूरी है, ऐसा इंडिया का बिलीफ है. That's why India supports a rules-based order, and India says that Indo-Pacific should be free, open, and inclusive. Now, this is a view shared with some of the important actors. For example, US talks about free and open Indo-Pacific. Japan also is interested in that. Australia is also interested in that. So on the basis of that, you have formulations like Quad. But when we talk about India and US relations, we simply say that India-US relations are based on convergence of values and convergence of interests. Both are democracies, rule of law, separation of power, checks and balances. ये सारे values हैं जो हमारे common हैं. And we say that our interest in economy, in diplomacy, in defense, in technology, in energy, in terms of diaspora, our interests are also converging. But one of the fundamental drivers of the relations and the way they are growing is the geostrategic convergence, meaning they have a common understanding, similar understanding of what they call Indo-Pacific, the larger geographic region where they are defining their future interests, right? So strategy का मतलब होता है long term. Anything which is of long term significance, we say it is strategically important. Anything which is fundamentally important, we say it is strategically important. Strategic का दूसरा usage होता है मिलिट्री और सिक्योरिटी टर्म्स में. सो दो समझ है स्ट्रैटेजिक टर्म की. कोई भी चीज विच इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर लॉन्ग टर्म इज स्ट्रैटेजिक, एंड स्पेसिफिकली इन टर्म्स ऑफ यूसेज वी जनरली हैव सीन दैट मिलिट्री सिक्योरिटी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में स्ट्रैटेजी इज यूज्ड, राइट? सो अगेन योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग इन यूपीएससी शुड बी बेस्ड ऑन अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ मल्टीपल फैक्टर्स. ये ऐसा एग्जाम नहीं है कि आपने एक डेफिनेशन रख लिया और हर जगह जाके वही बता दिया. कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ फैक्टर्स, राइट? सो दैट्स बेसिकली व्हाट यू शुड अंडरस्टैंड. नाउ देन ये बेसिकली डेटा है इंडिया यूएस के बारे में. क्या डेटा है? यूएस हैज बीन इंडियाज लार्जेस्ट ट्रेडिंग पार्टनर. सर्टेनली लास्ट ईयर इंडिया वाज यूएस वाज इंडियाज लार्जेस्ट ट्रेडिंग पार्टनर. Various sources, various data, you will find no matter which data source you see, that is the fact. For example, US data sources would say the trade was around 156 billion US dollars. All right, Indian data sources would say 119, 129. That depends on, for example, in US you have a financial calendar from January to December. In India you have financial calendar from April to March. So that is why there would be differences in data, right? But then again, this is why this examination is never about absolute numbers in these kinds of subjects. It is about patterns. No matter which data set you are using, you would not be wrong to say that US was India's largest trading partner. समझ पाओ तो समझो.
बाकी तो आप स्वतंत्र लोग हो. US is one of the top 5 investment destinations for Indian FDI. So of course India's FDI into US is also increasing. For example, US sources would say 12 billion US dollars of Indian investment, generating 71,000 jobs across 30 US states. Indian sources, depending on, again जब investment का data दे रहे हैं तो difference कहाँ पे आता है? Either it is a stock number or it is a flow number. What is a stock number? Overall cumulative number. 2000 to 2020, that is stock. Flow in a particular year, how much of FDI came into India. ये stock on flow का concept भी आप समझते होगे economy में. ठीक है, तो ये बेसिकली रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं किस चीज को कि क्या नेचर है इस रिलेशनशिप का. वी रिफर टू आवर रिलेशनशिप एज कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव एंड ग्लोबल स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप. ये नाम है हमारे रिश्ते का. रशिया के साथ रिलेशन को क्या कहते हैं? स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप. मीनिंग नाम चाहे कुछ भी हो, हम ये बोल रहे हैं कि दीज रिलेशंस आर इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस. एक साल स्ट्रेटेजिक कहा, उसके 10 साल बाद स्पेशल स्ट्रेटेजिक कहा, उसके 10 साल बाद कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव स्ट्रेटेजिक कहा, उसके 10 साल बाद भी कुछ कहना पड़ेगा. सो समटाइम्स इट इज सिंपली लाइक दैट बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया हैज नेवर डिफाइंड व्हाट अ स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप इज. तो आप कौन होते हैं उसका मतलब ढूंढने वाले. ऑलराइट, जब किसी चीज का मतलब नहीं मिल रहा हो, इसका मतलब ये समझो कि उसका मतलब किसी ने डिफाइन नहीं किया है. So that's why we have a functional understanding of it, that it denotes a long-term relation, a significant relation where there is a lack of any political discord, major political discord, and it's a valuable relation from multiple perspective. It can be because of trade or economy or energy or location or diaspora or any number of factors. So strategic relation simply is saying that it is an important long-term relationship. Why? You just look at the content of relation. With US, we have perhaps most comprehensive set of interactions. So we say that, for example, this comprehensive strategic partnership is based on the more than 50 dialogue mechanisms that we have. Secondly, as I said, convergence of values and interest. Thirdly, the shared interest that we see in areas like economy. So it's very clear, trade numbers show that. And also remember, we have a trade surplus with US in both goods and services. We have largest export market in the US in both goods and services, and we don't have a free trade agreement with US. So एक बहुत ही सिंपल सी ट्रेड एनालिसिस में बात हम कहते हैं कि India's trade performance is not affected by free trade agreements, it is affected by increase in income in the export markets. All right, so that is an example that we see here. US, whether you have a free trade agreement, you don't have a free trade agreement, you still have a large volume of trade. What does it say about the relation? It says that US is a prosperous, important market for us, right? Similarly, India is a large market which is becoming prosperous. So for a trading country like US, India would also be of interest, right? आगे चलते हैं. Defense is another pillar. We say 3 kinds of defense cooperation are visible. One, of course, is dialogues. So among the dialogues between India and US, there are various which cater to the defense and security cooperation. Second is the process to providing it strategic characteristics. So we see it through step-by-step development. 2005, we have a defense framework cooperation agreement which is signed. 2012, we launched DTTI, Defense Technology Trade Initiative, to basically explore area where we can co-develop and co-design and co-produce. All right, DTTI. तो ये इसका काम है आइडेंटिफाई करना इस तरह के प्रोजेक्ट्स जो हम जॉइंटली डेवलप करेंगे. फॉर एग्जांपल एक जो प्रोजेक्ट हमने आइडेंटिफाई किया है वो है अनमैन्ड एरियल व्हीकल, नई कैटेगरी ऑफ अनमैन्ड एरियल व्हीकल डेवलप करना. ऑलराइट, सो दैट इज समथिंग दैट DTI डिड. नाउ अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट व्हाट यू वुड सी इज in order to provide it a certain sustained character, there is a requirement in the US system that the focus on India be justified. Where so यही होता है, यूएस को जब समझोगे और पेपर 2 देखो तो कंपैरेटिव कॉन्स्टिट्यूशंस भी हैं. ऑलराइट, व्हाट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशंस आर इंपॉर्टेंट? यूके, यूएस, फ्रांस, रशिया when election is taking place, and China because it's a different model, right? So similarly you will see in US, when you are dealing with US, you are dealing with the president, the executive, but the legislature also has a separate power. Certainly it holds the purse, तो बिना उसके कोऑपरेशन के नहीं हो सकता. और तीसरा, प्राइवेट सेक्टर. In US, private sector is very important. All military manufacturing in US is in the private sector. Most of their military functions are outsourced. ठीक है? So that's where in 2016 Obama administration decided to attach the term major defense partner or grant India a major defense partner status. It simply systematizes this cooperation. All right. So now there is another category. आपने पूछा था ना 5I, वो आई, ये आई, इंडिया क्या है ये जानना जरूरी है. Major defense partner. And why? Because that is how it has to be established in the US system. What would it do? A, it would impart strategic character to defense ties. B, it would ease defense trade, defense manufacturing, sharing of technology. All right. कौन सी टेक्नोलॉजी, वो नाम केवल एग्जांपल्स हैं. चलो, अब मेजर डिफेंस पार्टनर बनने के लिए, मीनिंग in order to have closer defense cooperation, you have to sign agreements. Why? Because now you are entering into sensitive area where the proprietary content is important, where IPR is important, but strategically it is important that these technologies be kept secure, all right, from proliferation, espionage, etc. Right? So that's why we signed what are called 3 foundational agreements. What are these? So one is called Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Association. All right. So this is like logistics exchange agreement, but as we said, for designated purposes, right? Meaning A, rest, recuperation, refueling, repair, refurbishment. B, in times of exercises and in times of port visits, in times of HADR cooperation. So it is limited. Second is communications compatibility and security agreement. All right. So it is another agreement which basically secures cooperation in exchange of sensitive communication data, sensitive communication equipments. For example, we buy a plane and we want to add additional facilities to it, right? Maybe advanced communication equipment. So that would be covered by this kind of an agreement. All right, that India can be provided this kind of an equipment. Plus any other country, if it is using US data links for military affairs, potentially it opens the door for cooperation with those kinds of countries also, right? Thirdly is BECA, Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement. Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement is about geospatial cooperation, all right? Sharing geospatial data, data about terrain, topography, depth, right? So it would help in military planning, all right? It would help in intelligence. It would help in the precision of guided munition, rocket systems, all right? So that's basically what is being done through these agreements. They are what governments do. Governments का काम है agreement करना, rule करना, regulate करना, all right? Rule बनाना और regulate करना. तो ये है. चलो, अब third area of cooperation is number of exercises. So it is said that India conducts more number of exercises with the United States as compared to any other country. All right. What are these? Multiple, right? Yuddha Abhyas, Vajra Prahar, Tiger Triumph, which is an amphibious or tri-services exercise, right? But if you see around the year, they also participate in multiple other exercises. Malabar, all right, which started as a bilateral exercise between India and US, and in 2015 Japan joined as a third permanent participant. Sometimes Australia, Singapore participate, but they are not permanent participant in Malabar. All right, US hosts world's largest military exercise. It is called RIMPAC, Rim of the Pacific exercise. India has been participating in it since the beginning of the last decade. So that's another area of cooperation. Then they have multiple dialogues: Homeland Security Dialogue, Counter-Terrorism Working Group. Recently they established Counter-Narcotics Dialogue 2020. This year they have established Defense Cyber Dialogue. All right. So expansive areas of cooperation, expanding areas of cooperation between India and US. Science and technology cooperation. So various areas. One is civil nuclear cooperation. So we signed a path-breaking civil nuclear agreement with US in 2008. And perhaps that was a masterstroke for me. That is one of the agreements which clearly has brought advantages beyond the bilateral relation. Meaning it has started the process of India then joining MTCR or Australia group, right? So that's one. Technology sharing का part है वो भी. दूसरा in the area of space. So it's a no secret that when India became independent, some of our brightest minds were educated outside or went outside to learn more. US certainly is one country from where we gained initially, right? And that is the period of non-alignment. हम यही सोचते थे कि दुनिया का जो बेस्ट है वो हमको लेना है और झंझटों में नहीं पड़ना है, right? In one way, non-alignment was about that also. And then nuclear area also cooperation was there. For example, for earlier reactors that we developed, all right, at Trombay, experimental reactors, research reactors. So उसके लिए heavy water etc. कहाँ से आया, right? Canada or US. So that was there. Then after passage of NPT, what happened was, A, there was pressure on India to sign NPT. B, US itself passed an NPT Act which prohibited civilian nuclear commerce with any country which does not sign the NPT. तो वहाँ से बंद हो गया. But still it is important, right? Space, nuclear technology, these are two prominent areas where US is important apart from the military industrial cooperation that is there. So what you will see is space is particular area where this cooperation has a rational basis. ISRO as a low cost commercial option and NASA as perhaps world's most well equipped space administration agency, right? So it's very clear that ISRO has been launching, for example, you may have seen ISRO launches multiple satellites on PSLV vehicles these days, nano satellites, smaller satellites. So multiple satellites of NASA have already been launched by ISRO. Second is development. अभी recently इसमें और movement आएगा इस महीने, अगर आपने news पढ़ी हो तो आपने देखा होगा, NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar. This is a joint project that now is almost complete. All right, इस साल तक मतलब इस महीने ही आपको इस बारे में काफी जानने को मिल जाएगा. So that is one example, NISAR. All right, NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar. Right. Similarly, India is developing its gravitational observatory. Right, Indigo. US has a large gravitational observatory, LIGO. Right, so that is the cooperation. Right, so various areas of science and technology cooperation. Diaspora is considered to be an important pillar. Around 4 million people. Right, 3.8 is written here. So it's basically, when we break down number of who from India are outside, we say who are Indian citizens and who are the citizens of US but of Indian origin. Right, so when we say Indian origin people, it is around 4.5 million, all right, in US, a strong pillar of the relationship. Why? Because if you see, Ajay Pal Banga has been proposed by US to be president of World Bank. World Bank's president has always been an American, all right, or has acquired American citizenship. So Ajay Pal Banga is a prominent example of a person who was educated in India, worked in India in the corporate sector in the 1970s. मान लो अगर वो भी सिविल सर्विस दे रहे होते तो शायद आज वर्ल्ड बैंक के प्रेसिडेंट बनने के बारे में नहीं सोच रहे होते. Simply saying, a lot of people decide to do a lot of other things. So that is what you see, that Indians have become prominent names. For example, they are 1% of the population, less than 1% of the population, 10% of US doctors. All right, 25% of, and there is no way of ascertaining this data completely, but certainly it is a repeated data. 25% of startups in Silicon Valley are owned by Indians. In the corporate world, Indians have reached leadership position. All right, so these are all symbolic of who Indians are and how Indians are being recognized. Right, in NASA's space program itself, there are a lot of Indian names from the old times to the current times that you keep on hearing. In politics of US, so this is where you see diaspora's visibility, diaspora's contribution acts as a asset for India. All right, and then you have international cooperation. ये आप देख ले, ये सिंपली बात हम ये कह रहे हैं कि कौन कौन से ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. तो बेसिक ये पॉइंट आपको क्या सिखाता है कि this is also one layer of cooperation between any two countries. Right, 2+2 dialogue. क्या है ये? As I said, 50 and more dialogues. 2+2 dialogue is a newer format of dialogue between any two countries. So it is basically a dialogue between External Affairs Ministry, Defense Ministry combined with their counterparts from the other country. So first country with which we started a system of 2+2 dialogue is US, 2018. Second 2+2 dialogue took place in 2019. Third 2020. In 2021 it was postponed. In 2022 the fourth 2+2 dialogue took place. So 2+2 dialogue basically is a way of deepening the strategic ties. It means that now you have added another sensitive layer of dialogue. So in relations where there is no summit system, this holds greater significance because ministers talk, take decisions, bureaucrats work, draft, and leaders only announce. All right. So before the leadership meeting, you have the 2+2 dialogue, where if there are any large differences, they can be addressed. So that when the leaders meet, they only talk about क्या क्या अच्छा हो रहा है आजकल, इंडिया और यूएस ने ये डिसाइड किया. कभी जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट पढ़ो किसी भी विजिट के बाद, तो यू विल फाइंड दिस, बोथ कंट्रीज हैव डिसाइडेड, बोथ लीडर्स हैव सेड. सो बोथ कंट्रीज हैव डिसाइडेड, बोथ लीडर्स हैव सेड कहने से पहले भी बहुत सारी चीजें होती है ना, एट द ब्यूरोक्रेटिक लेवल, एट द मिनिस्ट्रियल लेवल. सो 2+2 डायलॉग इज दैट. ऑल राइट. तो अब क्या हुआ, हर डायलॉग में कुछ ना कुछ होता है, हम कोऑपरेशन बढ़ाएंगे. यहाँ पे बोथ साइड्स लुक फॉरवर्ड टू, ये जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट का की ही लाइन कॉपी पेस्ट है. ऑल राइट. बोथ साइड्स लुक फॉरवर्ड टू इंडियाज होस्टिंग ऑफ द इंडो पैसिफिक आर्मीज चीफ कॉन्फ्रेंस एंड इंडो पैसिफिक आर्मीज मैनेजमेंट सेमिनार. अपने आप में एग्जाम में ये कोई जरूरी चीज नहीं. इट सिंपली इज गिविंग यू एन एग्जाम्पल कि क्या होता है. हम बेसिकली इस डायलॉग के थ्रू अनाउंस कर रहे हैं और न्यू एरियाज ऑफ कोऑपरेशन. All right, both countries look forward to expansion of USAID supported COVID-19 learning exchange. NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar. अब देख लो एरिया आने लगे. डिफेंस टेक्नोलॉजी ट्रेड इनिशिएटिव विद जॉइंट प्रोजेक्ट्स ऑन एडवांस इमर्जिंग एंड क्रिटिकल मिलिट्री टेक्नोलॉजीज पे भी बात हुई. तो बेसिकली इस डायलॉग के लेवल पे यही होने लगता है कि हम क्या करने वाले हैं, हम क्या करने जा रहे हैं, हमने क्या रिजॉल्व किया, क्या किया है. ठीक है. इंडियन यूएस साइन प्रोजेक्ट एग्रीमेंट फॉर एयर लॉन्च अनमैन्ड एरियल व्हीकल under DTTI. So it is one of the projects that we have decided to work. दो तरह के प्रोजेक्ट envisaged हैं DTTI के अंदर. एक है इंडस्ट्री टू इंडस्ट्री और एक है गवर्नमेंट टू गवर्नमेंट. ऑल राइट. सो गवर्नमेंट टू गवर्नमेंट मीनिंग द पेंटागन, डिफेंस डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ डिफेंस यूएस एंड मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ डिफेंस इंडिया ये प्रोजेक्ट को गाइड करेगी. और दूसरा इंडस्ट्री कोलैबोरेशन भी. तो एक और ट्रेंड देखोगे कि a lot of Indian companies who have entered into defense manufacturing, Tata, Adani, है ना, Reliance, L&T, इसके अलावा नया बैंगलोर के आसपास खास तौर पे नए छोटे छोटे प्लेयर्स भी आ रहे हैं. So the trend is to form joint ventures with other countries. For example, Tata, Lockheed Martin का एक joint venture है which is manufacturing fuselage for Black Hawk helicopters near Hyderabad. So this is also another layer of cooperation which has been made possible by the consecutive agreements that we have signed, right? तो basic बात यही है जितना मैं बता रहा हूँ, और आप ये पढ़ लें भैया, है ना. काटसा क्या है, अगर आपके पास क्वेश्चन है जैसा तो पूछ लें. काटसा एक अमेरिकन कानून है, 2018 में आया. Its target is American adversaries as the law says, who वो लगातार एक ही तरह के देश रहे, ईरान, North Korea, and now Russia also. All right. So combating American adversary through sanctions, right? Sanctions are simply tools to change the behavior of another country, as I had told you earlier also. So ये जो है ये ट्रंप एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के दौरान आया. अब प्रॉब्लम इससे हमको ये है कि काटसा टेक्निकली वुड अप्लाई ऑन व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एनी न्यू सिग्निफिकेंट मेजर परचेज. S-400 is a major purchase, around $5 billion US. So we have been talking about it, yeah, and this question is hanging whether US is giving us a waiver or not giving us a waiver. So far US has not decided to act, but by law it's very clear that the possibility is always there because we have bought from Russia. So that's why as strategic partners our job is to talk to each other, put our points across, and if possible create exceptions. Why? We simply can say that if we are strategic partners, you would have to understand that S-400 is among the best in its class, and our defense posture mainly is vis-a-vis China, which is also your strategic adversary. तो ये बातचीत चल रही. काटसा आपने पढ़ लिया, पढ़ने नहीं पढ़ने या मनो ना पढ़े. इंडिया जापान, इंडिया जापान के बारे में भी बेसिकली दो तीन चीजें. दिस इज ईस्ट सी और सी ऑफ जापान. ऑल राइट. ईस्ट सी कौन कहता है? चाइना, कोरिया. उनको पसंद नहीं है जापान बहुत ज्यादा, रशिया भी. सी ऑफ जापान कौन कहता है? बाकी इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी एंड जापान इटसेल्फ, राइट. सो बेसिकली मैंने कल भी कहा था, ईस्ट चाइना सी इज सेपरेट, ईस्ट सी इज सेपरेट. ऑल राइट. अब अबाउट जापान. सो जापान बेसिकली इज अ ग्रुप ऑफ आइलैंड्स, आर्किपेलागिक कंट्रीज. सो मोर देन 2000 आइलैंड्स आर देयर. बट व्हाट आर द मेन वंस? So at the north there is Hokkaido, in the middle there is Honshu. This is the largest one. Then there is Shikoku and then there is Kyushu. Right? ये आपको जानना चाहिए. अब ये जो आइलैंड जा रहा है सी ऑफ ओखोत्स्क, इसके ऊपर हो गया कामचाटका पेनिनसुला ऑफ रशिया, और ये जो आइलैंड जा रहे हैं दीज आर कुरील आइलैंड्स। कुरील आइलैंड्स के बारे में यूपीएससी ने सवाल नहीं पूछा है, लेकिन जैसा पिछली बार पूछा था सेनकाकू एंड डियाओ पे, वैसे ही कुरील पे हो सकता है। सो इन कुरील आइलैंड द डिफरेंसेस आर बिटवीन जापान एंड यूएस, जापान एंड रशिया, नॉट यूएसएसआर बट डेटिंग बैक टू द यूएसएसआर पीरियड। सो ए primarily large parts of these islands are controlled by Russia and Japan claims them. ठीक है, तो they are also in some ways, for example if you are watching और देख भी अगर आप ध्यान से रहें तो इस साल की शुरुआत में 2022 की शुरुआत का मतलब जब यूक्रेन रशिया क्राइसिस हुआ उसके बाद के पीरियड में कुछ टेंशंस यहाँ पे भी had broken out here also on this matter also, not fighting but certainly claims and counter claims. ठीक, तो यूपीएससी ऐसे सवाल पूछता है, आपको पता है। अब विथ जापान वी हैव अ पार्टनरशिप, स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप विच वी कॉल इंडिया जापान global strategic partnership, strategic and global partnership, all right, that is what we call our partnership. So what does it mean? It means there are certain special features in this relationship, all right. It's an important relation. Two, one, historically, civilizationally, Buddhism, all right, commonality of civilization is something that we always draw back to. Secondly, we go back to the period of Second World War where Justice Radha Binod Pal, who served as a judge in a war crime tribunal or international war tribunal, in a way allowed Japan to save face. So that is a historical respect, relation of historical respect. India declined to sign peace treaty with Japan after the San Francisco conference and only signed it when Japan's sovereignty was restored, 1952. So historic respect. Then you see historically Japan has also been economically important. It's a miracle how that country rose from the ashes of Second World War, and in the 1980s it was a very common thing to say that Japan is going to replace US as the next power, at least economically. So in that you would see that the complementarity is seen in the context of India supplying iron ore, and Japan's first industry where it made mark was steel industry. Japan is not a major producer of iron. So that complementarity. Second, you will see Japan has been the largest provider of development assistance to India. Largest aid provider historically and even today is Japan. Thirdly, you will see in industrial sector, one of the prominent industries set up in India in the 1980s, 70s was Maruti Suzuki. All right, so Suzuki's involvement is another example of private sector's involvement in India. Now you see 21st century is where the strategic aspects of these relations are more and more clear. India and Japan believe in Asian century, but they say they want a multipolar Asia. So their vision itself is a contrast to what they perceive is what China is doing. China wants to dominate Asia. So both of them oppose, both of them are neighbors of China. They have territorial disputes with China, and both of them have large economic engagement with China also. All right. So in that context, they find it beneficial to cooperate. So 2000, they said that we will launch a global partnership for 21st century. Later on, they said we will make it a strategic partnership. Later on, as years progress, this is the name that we have, right? Special and global strategic partnership between India and Japan. So the important pillars are at diplomatic level, we have a summit system which is institutional. Every year prime ministers meet either in India or in Japan, that is the summit. We also established the 2+2 dialogue with Japan, all right. And then we have multiple other dialogues. For example, we have an India, Japan, Australia trilateral, we have Quad. So multiple levels of dialogue are taking place. We are part of G4, which has common position on the reform of United Nations, all right. And then we have military exercises like Shinyu Maitri, GIMEX and Malabar, all right. 2020 we signed what is called acquisition and cross servicing agreement, which is like a logistics support agreement. So our defense cooperation is also deepening, and this is all in the backdrop of convergence on geostrategy, that is Indo-Pacific, common view on what kind of Indo-Pacific they want. They have a free trade agreement, CEPA, signed in came into effect in 11, but their trade has been lagging. The trade has generally been around 15 billion US dollars or less. In recent times, the number has increased. It has reached 18 billion US dollars. Perhaps the latest figure would show 20 billion US dollars. But if you compare it with Bangladesh, which is a much smaller economy, we have 18 billion US dollars of trade. So that means despite complementarity, despite being together, despite having an agreement, we basically are lagging behind in the economic arena, specifically trade. But other areas of economic engagements are robust. For example, FDI and ODA, both. Government to government financial assistance for development and FDI, investment by private sector, both are growing. So India and Japan announced what they call India-Japan Investment Promotion Partnership. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe came to India in 2014-15 and he said that Japan would be investing 350 trillion yen in India, right? Around 33 to 35 billion US dollars of commitment, both public and private sources. ठीक है, इसको कमिटमेंट को बढ़ाया जब 2002 में the new prime minister Fumio Kishida came to India. So new commitment of Japan is 500 trillion yen, which is about 42 billion US dollars. All right, कि वो इतना यहाँ पे invest करेंगे. So that is basically from both public and private sector. The pace of FDI from Japan has certainly increased, but you would also see Japanese development assistance mainly is going in infrastructure building in India, right? Western dedicated freight corridor, Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, Chennai-Bengaluru industrial corridor, Delhi Metro, Kolkata Metro second phase, Northeast Highway Development Program second phase. All these are large infrastructure programs that you find are coming up with Japan's ODA. And at the same time, Japanese companies are coming into India and manufacturing. All right, in the automotive sector, you have all the Japanese names. In the electronics and electrical sector, also you have a lot of Japanese names, right? So that is how you should see this relation. In 2020, India, Japan, Australia launched an initiative called Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, right? So supply chain simply is a network from the supplier to the consumer. All right, so you can include for all the spectrum of activity which goes into manufacturing, right? Raw material supplier, intermediate goods supplier, all right, value addition, and then final export, transportation, etc. So this is your supply chain. A part of it is value chain also, where value addition is happening. So the simple thing has happened is that the world became specialized in terms of manufacturing. Two factors: one, wherever the manufacturing is cheap, transfer it to that part, and wherever there is adequate talent, technical capabilities, industrial base, manufacture there. So in this, what has happened is that global supply chain may have become skewed, right? So for example, cheap manufacturing, China is a dominant player. High tech manufacturing, you have West as the dominant player or Japan as a dominant player. And what is happening is as strategic competition grows, there is a pressure on China from US. So A, there is doubt about this part of the supply chain. B, COVID-19 when it happened, first lockdowns happened in China. When lockdowns happened in China, we found that a lot of goods that we had taken for granted are just not available in the market. So that is supply chain shock. How do you deal with it? By assessing the length and breadth of your supply chain and finding where exactly you have to make an intervention. But generally you would do it through broader moves like offshoring is what? Offshoring is procuring from outside, from somebody else. All right, so your manufacturer is somewhere else. Now, there can be various versions of offshoring. So we talk about friendshoring, meaning procure from friendly countries so that you can be resilient towards supply shock. You can be sure that supplies would be there. Second is near shoring, meaning geographically procure from near geographies. This is something that is happening in world politics. Every country is talking about this. US had initiated a supply chain summit. India participated in that. So India, Australia and Japan launched a supply chain resilience initiative. At now, current level, it is only at the level of dialogue. But potentially it can be, for example, India, Japan, Australia pooling their resources and basically developing, let's say, Southeast Asia, CLMV countries, Vietnam, as the option for low cost manufacturing, which currently is dominated by China. So that's why you will find the term China plus one model coming in. It is a supply chain model where you realize that overnight you cannot reduce reliance from any country. Just as you would see after 2020, India-China trade has gone up or gone down? India-China trade gone up. So that is something that shows you that no matter how much you talk is always cheap. बात करना हम सबसे आसान काम है. तो आप ये कह सकते हैं कि चाइना मत खरीदो, ये मत करो, बट कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर क्या है? यू वुड लाइक टू बाई फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल व्हाट फिट्स इन योर पॉकेट, है ना? सेकेंड, सस्ता सुंदर टिकाऊ, राइट? तो आसान नहीं है कंज्यूमर बिहेवियर चेंज करना या रिलायंस कुछ सेक्टर्स में चेंज करना. जैसे एपीआई, 70% ऑफ एपीआई इज कमिंग फ्रॉम चाइना. इफ फार्मा इज आवर लार्जेस्ट सेक्टर, इट्स डिपेंडेंट ऑन इनपुट्स फ्रॉम चाइना. Second, various intermediate goods. If MSME has to be revived, intermediate goods are required. It's coming from China. So in the meantime, what you do is you continue reducing reliance, but you develop an alternative model of supply, alternative source of supply. This is called China plus one model, all right, of supply chain. चलें आगे. चलो, अब ये आपने देख लिया. ये सारी चीजें आप पढ़ लें. अगर आपको बुरा लगे पढ़ना तो आप ना पढ़ें, ठीक है? इंडिया ऑस्ट्रेलिया बहुत ब्रीफली, बहुत ज्यादा बात करने की जरूरत नहीं. ईसीटीए के बारे में बात कर लिया. अगेन स्ट्रेटेजिकली दिस कंट्री इज इंपॉर्टेंट. वी हैव अपग्रेडेड रिलेशनशिप टू कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप. वी हैव लॉन्च्ड अ 2+2 डायलॉग विद दिस कंट्री ऑल्सो. वी हैव साइंड अ सिविल न्यूक्लियर एग्रीमेंट विद दिस कंट्री फॉर यूरेनियम सप्लाई. ऑल राइट. So from minerals perspective, mineral security perspective, it's an important country. Be it rare earth minerals, be it traditional minerals like coal, iron ore, or be it nuclear fuel like uranium. It's an important country. Secondly, in the Indo-Pacific, we have a convergence with this country. Thirdly, it looks India as a potential economic partner, and we can also look at it as such because there are other strategic aspects of relation. So this is something that has happened. But I've already told you, comprehensive strategic partnership, summit system, it's a biannual summit. Now 2+2 dialogue also with Australia. So it all symbolizes how this country was geographically far away, and that's why not much of a focus of our policy is these days an important partner for us in the Indo-Pacific. Apart from that, what we say, there is convergence of interest, convergence of values. What kind of values? Both Westminster style of democracies. We say both are sporting nations, two great sporting nations. So in some cases, these are the terms that we start using to emphasize what can be common. Third is Australia emerging as an important tourist destination. A lot of Indians are going to Australia, all right? And also a preferred education destination. Harvard, Cambridge में ना हुआ, Ivy League में ना हुआ, Canada भी चलो ना हो पाया, McGill वगैरह, तो ऑस्ट्रेलिया तो है ही, all right? So a lot of Indians are going to Australia. So it has emerging as an education destination, another hotspot for our diaspora, right? So that's why Australia is important. बाकी अगर इसमें कुछ complicated हो प्लीज मुझे बता दें, मैं आपको समझा दूंगा. 2+2 डायलॉग है, लॉजिस्टिक शेयरिंग एग्रीमेंट है, कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप है, न्यूक्लियर एग्रीमेंट है. पिच ब्लैक is an exercise of Air Force Malabar. Sometimes Australia participate. Regular exercise is AUSINDEX. Ostra Hind is military exercise. All right. So this is there. They are part of Quad, Trilateral Supply Chain Initiative, which is Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. Australia, India, Indonesia Trilateral Forum. Australia, Japan, India Trilateral Forum. Australia, France, India Trilateral Forum. मतलब dialogue बहुत सारे हैं. And IPEF. चलो अब IPEF पे आ जाते हैं. इसको भी बहुत सारे लोग बहुत वैल्यू दे रहे हैं. So first of all, अभी 8 नहीं बजे, 8 मैं अपना टाइम तो पूरा करूंगा. आप जा सकते हैं, आपको स्वतंत्रता है. आपके पास वीडियो होगा नहीं होगा वो आप देख लें. कंटेंट इसलिए मैं कहता हूं पढ़ो, मेरी जरूरत नहीं आपको, पर मुझे मेरा काम करने दो. कोई बात नहीं, किसी को किसी की जरूरत नहीं है. एग्जाम अकेले ही दोगे. अच्छा अकेले मत होल्ड करो ना, जो जाना चाहते हैं वो जाएं, ठीक है? मैं रोक नहीं रहा और मैं कह रहा हूं आपका नुकसान भी नहीं होगा. मुझे मेरा काम करने दो. चलो अब सारे विरोध करके चले जाओगे तो मैं क्या करूंगा? कैमरा ऑन है, मैं पढ़ाता रहूंगा. ऑल राइट. तो थोड़ा पेशेंस डेवलप करो. 3 घंटे से मैं बोल रहा हूं. क्यों? मेरे स्ट्रगल से क्या ले? मैंने कोई स्ट्रगल
ऑनलाइन एक्सेस है आपके पास क्लास का, आप घर से देखिए, आपको ब्रेक की बात करने की बहुत ज़रूरत पड़ती है, आप घर से देखिए और इस समय संवाद बंद करिए। चलिए आगे चलते हैं, आईपीएफ थोड़ा समझ लेते हैं हम सिंपली। मैं जैसा फिर भी कह रहा हूं, जिनको नहीं समझना है वो जा सकते हैं ना, आज़ादी है सबके पास, क्या इस पे और ज़्यादा बात करने की जरूरत, जिनको रुकना है रुकें, ऑलराइट, क्योंकि मैं तो रुक रहा हूं। चलो आईपीएफ क्या है, मैं पढ़ के आने को कहता हूं तो आपके डायलॉग आते हैं कि पढ़ने का टाइम नहीं मिला, मैं कहता हूं फास्ट हो जाएगा, फास्ट करना चाहते हो मेहनत करो। सो आईपीएफ क्या है, सिंपली एक डायलॉग प्लेटफॉर्म है, इट्स ओनली अ डायलॉग प्रपोज्ड बाय हुम, यूएस, फॉर व्हाट, देखो ऑकस मिलिट्री, ऑलराइट, क्वाड मल्टीपर्पज वे ऑफ इंक्रीजिंग योर फ्रेंड्स, IPEF economic initiative, all right, so it is a great power which is planning very carefully about its future in an important region, right? So IPF is only a dialogue proposed by US, 14 participating countries. Who are those? देखो इसको याद करने में बहुत एफर्ट नहीं लगाना तुम्हें, पहला तो क्वाड, क्वाड के 4 तो याद रहते ही है, दूसरा याद कर लो आसियान कंट्रीज, ऑलराइट, आसियान कंट्रीज याद हो गए, और तीसरा याद कर लो इंडिया के इंपॉर्टेंट ट्रेडिंग पार्टनर्स जापान, कोरिया, राइट। अब फिर इसमें एक आध दो बच जाएंगे जैसे कि न्यूजीलैंड, वो तो याद हो ही जाएगा, ठीक है, और फीजी, ठीक है। सो व्हेन यू हैव टू रिमेंबर लार्ज क्वांटिटी ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन, व्हाट यू डू इज यू ब्रेक इट डाउन इनटू सम स्मॉलर रिकॉग्नाइजेबल कैटेगरीज, ऑलराइट, किसी भी तरीके से बेसिस बना लो, एक याद हो जाएगा। चलो अब क्या है, इट इज नॉट अ फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट, ये क्लियरली बता दिया, अच्छा कि इन्होंने लिख दिया बहुत ही क्लियरली। आईपीएफ इज मोर अबाउट स्टैंडर्ड सेटिंग, मीनिंग इट्स अ डायलॉग। नाउ वी आर लुकिंग टुवर्ड्स व्हाट्स द फ्यूचर ऑफ ग्लोबल ट्रेड। सो एक टर्म सुना होगा आपने, जियो इकोनॉमिक्स, ऑलराइट। सो वी आर सेइंग दैट जियो पॉलिटिक्स एंड जियो इकोनॉमिक्स कैन नॉट बी सेपरेटेड। What kind of relations countries have would impact who trades with whom. Similarly, simply you see all these apprehensions about China, where the very simple fact is China is the largest trading partner of US, Japan, India, right, among the largest. तो ये complication of economy, so that's why you see what is happening, what is possible, क्या कर सकते हैं. So these are some of the most important economies here. China is not there if you notice, all right. If it is Indo-Pacific economic framework, China is a large Indo-Pacific country. So it means that there is a strategic prism here. It is about the future. एग्जाम के हिसाब से क्या याद करना, 4 पिलर हैं, मतलब 4 ब्रॉड एरियाज में होगी। कौन सा? 1 क्लियर एंड सिंपल ट्रेड, 2 सप्लाई चेन, C इमर्जिंग एरियाज, क्लीन एनर्जी, डीकार्बनाइजेशन, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, ऑल इंपॉर्टेंट एरियाज, टैक्स एंड एंटी करप्शन, ऑलराइट। जैसा G20 में भी देखोगे, देयर आर 2 ट्रैक्स. One is the Sherpa track, where what is talked about non-financial economic issues like poverty, like corruption, like taxation, okay, and there is an economic track where clearly macroeconomic issues, policy issues, interest rate issues, these are discussed. So ये उसके बारे में है, ठीक है। अब इंडिया ने ये बस समझ लो, इंडिया ने क्या ज्वाइन नहीं किया है, ट्रेड पिलर, राइट। क्या स्टेटमेंट था हमारा? So we said that for us to join the trade pillar, you would have to explain what do we get in return. So we don't want right now. US is not offering any free trade agreement, तो हमारे लिए ज़्यादा कुछ इसमें है नहीं. Rest is about rules. So the idea is always, it is always better to be present on the table where rules are being made, rather than उसके बाद रोना रोते रहो. तो participation का मतलब ही ये है कि we want to remain relevant and we want to see where does it go. Maybe later on if some benefit is there, we may join trade. But right now, since rules are being shaped, so at this stage joining it means that we have the ability, maybe some potential, maybe some space to shape the future rules. All right? तो ये जो करेगा होगा, ये कब पता चलेगा? 10-15 साल बाद. All right? It's in a very nascent stage. बाकी आप पढ़ लें, सिग्निफिकेंस बता दिया, 44% ऑफ लैंड एरिया, 65% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन, 62% ऑफ जीडीपी. अब सीख गए होगे शायद, जब क्वेश्चन आता है ना सिग्निफिकेंस का, इट्स आंसर्ड इन 2 ways. मेंस के लिए पॉइंट बता दे रहा हूं. 1, आर्ग्यूमेंट ऑफ मैग्नीट्यूड, व्हाट इज द साइज ऑफ द मार्केट, साइज ऑफ डेमोग्राफी, ये है ना, कितना मार्केट क्रिएट करेगा, ये इसको कहते हैं आर्ग्यूमेंट ऑफ मैग्नीट्यूड. दूसरा है नॉर्मेटिव आर्ग्यूमेंट. व्हाट वुड इट डू? सो इट वुड प्रमोट लिबरलाइजेशन ऑफ ट्रेड, ऐड टू रूल्स बेस्ड ऑर्डर इन ट्रेड. ये है नॉर्मेटिव आर्ग्यूमेंट. नॉर्मेटिव नॉर्म्स को कैसे आगे बढ़ाएगा और एक्चुअल कॉन्क्रीट टर्म्स में क्या ऑफर कर रहा है,
मार्केट साइज क्या है इसका, राइट? पॉपुलेशन का फिगर यही दिखाता है, मार्केट साइज, ऑलराइट? ट्रेड शेयर क्या है, जीडीपी क्या है, राइट? सो दीज टू आर्ग्यूमेंट्स, दीज डेटास आर जनरली यूज्ड टू डू दिस रादर देन सिंपली कि पीटी में सवाल आ जाएगा, ऑलराइट? इट्स नॉट नेसेसरी पीटी में सवाल आ जाएगा। चलिए भैया, आप सभी को जल्दी हो रही थी तो आप अब जा सकते हैं बिल्कुल। अगली बार जब हम आए तो कहीं से भी शुरू कर लेंगे, पर अगली क्लास में द कंटेंट इज गोइंग टू बी ओवर, ऑलराइट? बिकॉज I have not taken a simple chronological page by page approach only. There is always an interlink. तो जहाँ जो चीज़ relevant लगती है मैंने वहाँ वो जोड़ा है. So इस तरीके से finally if you read you would realize that actually the content has been covered. All right. So next class would be last class. Tomorrow we would not be meeting, so most probably next week. Right. Thank you very much.